podcast. Our slogan here at Flyover Conservatives is wake up, speak up, and show up. We all wanted President Trump to do 80 million things to save our country. And what we've learned over these last couple of years, what we really need is 80 million of us doing one thing every single day to save our own country.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to be doing one thing each day to save your own country, you need to know what you're doing, which means you need the best advisors possible in every area of your life. When it comes to your health, when it comes to your children's education, even areas of your faith, when it comes to your finances, for sure, to be able to make intelligent decisions on your own and taking responsibility for your own outcomes. Now, there's a guy we've known for 25 years. We knew him before he even had his first college degree.
Yep.
And then we finished that. Then he got a PhD. Then he got another PhD. And that education has never been more relevant than it is right now, because one of them is in economics. And when it comes to understanding global politics, to things happening in the world, you need great advisors. And that's what today's show is all about, because we're going to do a deep dive with the one, the only Dr. Kirk Elliott.
Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
Dr. Kirk, thank you so much for coming into the studio here with us.
We have you live.
I know, it's so exciting.
For 2 years, we've done, virtual, meetings with you and seeing you on the screen, and it's been helpful. It's been a lifeline, not just for us, but for a lot of people. Yeah. It's kind of like when you talk to your medical doctor too. You also get these little minutes to ask them a personal question and stuff. So we're just always picking your brain and things. But we were really excited to get your book, The Thriving in Economics Tsunami. And I like this because it's undeniable when you got people like Jamie Dimon saying offshore is a terrible storm, and that's the president of Chase Bank. You got some of the top advisors, even Janet Yellen, and people are kind of starting to be transparent of like, we're headed into a tough time. But the other side with you having the two PhDs is you have your theology, your faith-based, and thriving. And that's the theme what we talk about every week. Just because the world is going crazy doesn't mean that your world has to. Jesus was able to sleep inside of every storm.
Yep.
And I think that's an important kind of backdrop when we talk about finances, because, not to be in fear and to partner with faith. And I'm anxious to break this book down with you today.
Well, I'm eager to do that because literally I talk to hundreds of people every single week. As a firm, we're talking to thousands of people every single week. And the common denominator of everybody that calls is they're gripped and paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
And I think this is the common denominator, that this undertone that actually is moving through society right now is everybody is focused on the storm. And that will bring fear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And fear will paralyze, or fear will cause you to make the wrong decision.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that the storm has to go away, but we need to focus as a country and as individuals on the solution.
Yeah.
Right. Because that brings hope. So it's like, stop focusing on the storm, start focusing on the solution. And here's the thing. Sometimes when I'm on shows like yours, people will bellyache at me and they'll say, Kirk, you keep talking about this fearful stuff. It's like, I don't make up the news.
Right.
It's like, I'm not the politicians that are creating this world. We're just talking about it so we understand, because once you understand, you can have a successful transition into a thriving life.
Amen.
Right. So that's what this is all about. It's about bringing hope into this world where people are consumed and gripped and paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
To focus on the solution.
Well, anybody that knows you, the image I kind of get, like when we're talking, is, if somebody's on a high wire, they're not supposed to be looking at the ground and calculating, oh, if I fell, I'm in a lot of trouble here. Like, no, you focus on where you're going.
Right.
And all your conversations are always like, okay, this is happening, but where are you going? And how can we work together using godly principles to protect yourself from the drunk drivers that are, behind the wheel of a lot of positions of leadership that are affecting our currency and affecting those climates. And I think that's an important place to be. I want to talk to you, before we get deep into the book. We both share a faith. We both are believers, and we both, I know because your dad was a mentor of ours. Growing up, you grew up in the church, and there's a lot of influence there. I like to talk initially when it comes to just the idea of money, because sometimes somebody can have the best advice ever, but it's their relationship to money, their placement, in the world. Jesus talked about money about as much as he talked about anything else, and sometimes you find though in the church. An odd relationship to someone's health. and a healing, or I'm sick. Like God made me sick because when I was sick, I prayed more.
Mhm.
You know, and you have this kind of like, that's a weird theology. How'd you come up with that? So you see it with healing a lot, and then you also see it with money. And the people like will create a theology to maybe match their current financial situation, or the fact they don't like their boss, or don't like this, or the reason somebody had a lot and failed, or a celebrity. Like, see, that's why I don't want to have a lot of money. It's better, you know, there's just so many weird things.
Almost scared of money.
Yeah, like a weird attachment specifically, I think with people in general, but specifically, you know, with people of faith.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your kind of, I guess, lifelong journey with that? Because you've probably seen all the same flannel graphs that I have, and you've visited a million churches and been around, you know, and you hear a lot of this.
Yeah, the flannel graphs. That's funny.
Yeah,
we kind of dated ourselves.
Yeah,
a little bit.
But Sunday school class, and there was always like the donkey that would fall off.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. So money is weird in the church. Not gonna lie, right? Because you've got bipolar extremes. You've got the name it, claim it, major prosperity, which I think is off base. You also have a false humility kind of a crowd that says the only way we can love Jesus is if we're poor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then everything in between. It's like neither one of those extremes are correct, in my opinion. See, there's a difference between using money for good and the love of money.
Yes.
Right. There is.
That's a great
because
point.
I believe God wants us to live not with a mindset of poverty, but with a mindset of abundance. Now, I'm not talking about abundance being, money is everything to us, right? Abundance means you have this abundant lifestyle, this inner feeling that I can use money for good, right? It's the abundance means your needs are taken care of, and the excess you get to give.
Right.
Right? Because God created us to be givers. God didn't create us to be wanters and always seeking more and more and more and more, right? Now that's man's twisted version of a distorted view of what God views money. And this is my opinion, right? But I've seen it all in the church, because I got saved when I was like 5.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that was 48 years ago. And I grew up in the church.
Yep.
And I've seen everything from traveling evangelists flying around in their jets saying, boy, you can have my anointing of being uber rich. It's like, oh my word, that's a disgusting comment. Right? It's like, no.
Yep.
But God's word never returns void. And he says, when you give, and you give with a grateful heart, watch out.
Right.
Because the floodgates of heaven will open up.
Yeah.
And you will not have room enough to contain it all. So those blessings aren't just financial blessings. It's relationships. It's peace of mind. It's a lot. But finances are a part of it. And so that's the verse in Malachi, right? That we all talk about
When
giving.
we tithe. Yeah.
When we tithe. But there's the next verse in there is almost even as equally as important as that, because it unlocks protection. Because it says when you give, you're going to open up the floodgates of heaven, but the locust won't be able to eat your field, right? So when you give, there's provision and there's protection, both.
That's so
And
good.
that's how I look at money is God would love for us to live an abundant lifestyle where all of our needs are met, and we can take care of the widows and the orphans and everything that the gospel calls us to do.
It's interesting because it's not a mandate. God doesn't say you have to give, but he does say test him on that. You don't really hear that from the Lord, very much, but he says, test me on this and I will show you. And I think that's really an interesting thing with tithing, but you are doing your part. It's almost like the little boy that brought the fish and the loaves. It's like he brought something and then God multiplied it, but you are actually giving something. It's like, if you do this, then I'll do this in return. So in your book, you actually talk about the significance and the importance of tithing and giving. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because the Bible tells us that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He does not need our money.
Right.
Right. He can do anything with anything.
It's his anyway.
Yeah, but he wants to partner with us and he wants to bless us, right? So and the whole model of scripture is God gave his son gave his life, right? That's all about giving, right? And so then what we are to do is we are to give of our time, of our finances, of our prayer, of our love, of our everything that we've got. Just model that that's what Christianity is all about to me. It's about loving your neighbor. It's about giving. It's about bending over backwards, going the extra mile, because this world needs it right now.
Do you think it's also a heart position? I was just thinking about like Abraham when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, because Isaac to them was like, it was like everything. Like they'd wanted Isaac for so long. And then when they finally got Isaac, God was like, okay, I want you to sacrifice him. And obviously they climbed up that mountain. I can't even imagine the feeling that they would have had, going there and knowing I'm going to sacrifice my son. But then when God saw his willingness, God stopped him and he provided something else. Yeah. But is it almost a heart position of, I'm not going to worship this, whatever that is.
Like how tight is your grip on what you have?
Almost like an idol, But God is actually the most important.
Yeah, it is the most important. It's a mindset to me. It's like when the offering plate comes by at church, right? It's not that, I have to give.
Right.
I have to give my first 10%.
Yeah.
It's I get to give. I get to. It's not I have to. But when you do and you have that, I mean, God's going to judge us by our motives, our thoughts, our actions, our deeds, everything, our words, everything, right? And so that's it's a framework. It is a heart issue. Is I get to give. I get to bless somebody, not that I have to. And here's the weird thing about Jolene and I, my wife, is when my daughter was born, we had nothing. We were so far below broke. I just wish we were at zero.
Someday we're gonna be at zero, babe.
We've been there.
I would love to be at zero, right?
Yep.
And so it was at that point where I just cried out to God, saying, I've been faithful my whole life. I've tithed. And I heard this voice in my head. It's like, give more. It's like, give more of what? I don't have anything.
Right.
Right. But it's not the amount. It's the heart. Right. So we started to give 20% instead of just 10%. Right. And it was at that moment that things started opening up, impact and influence, and doors were opening. And ever since then, we started to measure our success, not by how much we made, but how much we gave.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that when I saw my tax return, it's like, wow, we gave a lot this year. We must have made a decent amount.
Yeah.
I mean,
to be able
based
to
on what we just gave.
Yeah. So that's what we started to look at. And it's the weird thing. You cannot outgive God.
No.
And whenever somebody calls into my office, like, we just can't make ends meet. We just can't. Every month we don't have enough money. And my first question to them is always, well, how much do you give?
Wow.
And a lot of times the people say, well, I can't afford to give. When God blesses me, then I'm going to be able to give. It's like, no. You've got it wrong. You can't afford not to give. Because God can do more with less than you can do with all.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So
and
true.
everybody has something to give. You can't wait till like, well, when I get that promotion, I'll do it. Because, we look at it in every category of life. When I'm the most stressed on time and the least amount, it's like, I probably need to sow some time. I need to give the thing that I'm lacking in the most. And so like a big thing for us was our marriage. I came from a long line of divorce and a lot of siblings with divorce. And so marriage was important. So we've always tried to sow into other people's marriages. If the church was having a conference or something, we made an agreement when we first got married. We're going to do one thing each year for our marriage. We would find something. If the church had a conference or some Dennis Rainey thing, or, we would go somewhere, Mark Gungor, whatever we could find, like we did one thing each year. But sowing into other people's doing the same thing. We buy a lot of books. Man, this really helped me. This is good. So we buy a case of those books. And just sowing into other people, because it's still just it's seed. And if you want more apples in your life, then you can't hoard your apple seed. You got to put them in the ground. And I think it's like Stacy said, that heart issue towards
whatever it is.
We first started making a little bit of money, kind of crawling out of it. 'Cause we were in a position too where I was donating plasma 3 times a week for cash. You get $15, then 20, then 25 if you donate plasma 3 times in the same week. And it was just trying to, make ends meet. We were young and, there's nobody had a nest egg around us or anything. And we started kind of crawling out of that. And I don't know if I bought it or you given it to me, but it was like a Seiko watch, but it was kind of nice. It was gold. It was like the nicest thing I'd ever had. And we were in a church service and there was a visiting pastor there and he's like from Nigeria or somewhere like this. And he was speaking, and the thing in the offering plate was going along. And I saw it before it even got to me. Is at the end of the row and it was coming. And I just felt God inside say, you should give him your watch. And I was like, and immediately I had to just like, this is mine. a little bit of a Gollum thing.
Yeah.
You know, like this is the nicest watch I've ever had. And I just felt God say, like, do you want that to be the only watch you ever have? You know, like I have so much more, you know, for you. And it just really showed me, like, I was holding on that tight, and I'm like, I don't want this then. You know, I want what God has for me, and I want him to have whatever he can get through me. So I just took the watch off and put it in the plate. I'm like, and even if, because I thought, did I think that, or was that God? And I started having this chatter. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I would rather err. And that was just a crazy idea I had. I took it off and put it. I didn't even say anything to Stacy. I just put it in there. We got home. She said, so you want to talk about the watch thing or something? And I said, I felt like I was kind of hanging on to that, and God had something, you know, more for me. And he has, you know, continued to bless us. But that was kind of, we were first starting to kind of get something. And another story, you know, on that is in that same kind of a window, we're just starting to kind of make some money and have a little bit extra. We had a ton of medical debt from our daughter's birth, and there was some stuff that kind of piled up. It seemed like a lot to us. It was a larger amount than what we'd ever made in a year at that point. And so that it had come up, and it was like, and we got some advice, not from your dad, a different mentor, but it was still back in kind of those days in that era of, you know, you guys need to get out of this hole before you start giving. And
so
tithing
not a good
specifically.
idea to tithe. You probably should get yourself out of debt
first.
Was the advice.
And then do that. And we're just like,
I remember sitting down with you at the table, and we were like, just can't do that. It doesn't feel right.
No.
I don't think that we should do that.
And I would rather fail partnering with God than succeed just doing this. I got this, you know. And so we did it. And I'm telling you what, if I had to trace back in our life, like a defining moment of, you know, and you know, incomes of different things, but we've never been without. We've never. God's always provided. There's always been an abundance. Maybe it wasn't a ton of abundance, but it was always more than we needed, and we've been able to give. And I think that's just. It's like an offering, a little opportunity that God just has so much for us, you know, but we can't hold on to it tight. And we also can't be like taking like undue glory from not having, you know, any more than
you almost a pride in being poor,
a pride in poverty, you know, of being less. Cause I wouldn't want my kids to walk around. Yeah. We don't have any food and I don't have any stuff because David's my dad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not a good reflection on me either. So there's a healthy balance that I think as believers, people really, they fight on that mentally inside themselves of how do I feel about money? And I think it's important to get this out in the open because you're talking about wealth, you know, and actually, you know, this transference of wealth and what are we going to do and how are we going to steward that? But it really has got to get right in people's heart to start with. It
has to. And your illustration of the watch, you know, I heard John Maxwell talk about this once, and it's the open hand principle, right? If we have open hands, when God rains down blessing, it fills up, and then the excess falls off to other people. Yeah. If you have a closed hand, like a closed fist mentality, this is mine. Yep. All of the blessings that God is raining down just bounces off, and and it doesn't do anything, right? So that principle, I mean, you all did it, I'm sure, with Colton and Avery, just like I did it, and Jolene did it with Riley and Caden, is teaching them this giving, teaching them how to give, right? Because to me, when you're teaching these kind of principles, it's an inheritance. Like when we're talking about money, an inheritance is something that you leave for somebody, where a legacy is something that you build into somebody. And what we're trying to do is create legacy that will go on from generation to generation to generations, break that curse of poverty in people's lives into this giving mindset, and it's going to be amazing what happens. It truly is going to be amazing what God starts to do and unleashes in your life when you're simply givers. And that's what we want to train, not just my clients, not just the people that we're talking to on the show, but our kids, our family, and go just deep into those roots of building legacy, because that's going to last generations.
Amen. That is so important.
It's an interesting thing we used to talk a lot about in business. We, you know, doing lectures in that world. You know, the media, I don't think it's a conspiracy that they all got together and had a meeting on it, but it's hard to find a movie where there's like a good rich guy. You know, you watch every Marvel comic, it's always like the evil billionaire is the evil villain. And then you got Spider-Man, you know, he's broke. You know, and his, you know, Uncle Ben's like, we may be poor, but at least we're honest. And it implies like, well, you can't be rich and honest, or like the Titanic, you know, it's like, you know, the the pretentious rich people at the top, you know, and then down on the bottom of the boat is where they have fun and they party and this kind of stuff. And
the rich are evil. They locked all of the poor down the bottom. You know,
Right.
it's like,
you know, like the hero of the movie is Jack, who's the only guy that really didn't contribute anything. He won his ticket to get on there. You know, he's like, you know, just kind of skating through life. He's not really a contributor, but he's the hero, you know, of thing. But there's, you know, I don't care if you go back to the Beverly Hillbillies or, you know, any sitcom or anything. It's like anybody that has more than enough is positioned as a bad guy. They stepped on other people. They squashed on someone else. They have more because they squeezed it out of somebody else. And I'm sure there are examples of that, and we could probably find them. You know, a lot of people made billions during COVID. You know, there's probably a lot of things that need to be looked into in that world. But for the most part, people I know that follow principles over the course of their life, that accumulate wealth, that are the people in your church that you would go to if your kid's going on a mission trip, that you want to talk to this guy that owns the heating and air conditioning company. He's got like the people who do this the right way and accumulate, they're not evil villains. No. Typically, they're more likely to be like, "Oh, you don't have it here. I'll get your coffee. Maybe buy coffee for the car behind them without it." Like the people who I know that usually have more than they need are typically pretty generous with it.
Right. And what I've found is those people, you don't really know that they have a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not bragging about it.
No.
They're not driving the big, huge Lamborghinis and Bentleys. They're probably driving a used Ford F-250 pickup.
American made. Yep,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm serious. It's like, it just happens that way because they've learned how to steward their wealth well. And they've saved up for a rainy day. This is one of the problems with America is we haven't saved. And this is where every story in the Bible is used and needed for our own growth and for our own success, right? Because there was the dream about the 7 fat cows and the 7 lean cows, right?
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? It's like when we have the big fat years as an economy, like during the Reagan years and during the Trump years, you use that excess to save up because the economy is cyclical. You're going to have growth times, you're going to have shrinkage times, and growth times and shrinkage times. So when during the growth times you save up the excess, so then when the shrinkage time comes, your lifestyle doesn't need to change because you're just using the savings, and then the economy will turn around again and you build up. And this is God's way. This is why this story was there, right? But we become accustomed to living above our means, not living below our means. When times are good, interest rates were low, what did we do? We just kept utilizing our savings, buying more because it's cheap credit. And now we've massed so much debt that when interest rates start rising like they are right now, it's like, oh man, I was just living hand to mouth with the lowest interest rates in the history of the country. Now, when they go up, I don't know how I'm going to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
So Americans have done that, but also our country has done that.
Oh yeah.
We have a lot of Americans that complain about what the federal government's doing in their spending. You know, we show the debt clock all the time on the show. But how can I really hold them accountable if I have the same on a microcosm? You know, that's we lived in Mexico for 2 years and did missions work there in an orphanage. And, you know, people would come down for like a 1-week trip. And I remember how often we would talk to people that say, I would love to be doing this full time. Like they do it for a week and they're coming back. And I think they really had a heart for that. I remember one specific couple that I was talking to, and you know, they were like a nurse and a heating air conditioning guy, you know, kind of a job, electrician. You know, they had a good income between the two of them. And they made that comment, I really feel like we're called to do this. I would love to be doing this more. And they're like, we just couldn't afford it financially. Well, over the week you're talking to them, they also had a vacation house with jet skis on a lake, you know, and debt. They would hard, you know, and it's like, so often debt does keep God's people from doing what God has for them, handcuffed to those things. And like, we have that as a nation that's put us in bondage a little bit, but we have that personally.
Well, here we go back to the Bible again, right? Do we have bad kings because we have bad people that elect them? Or are people bad because you have a bad king, right? Which is the chicken and which is the egg? Well, I think there's a mantle of leadership and authority, and we will follow the lead of our ruler, right? So we've had government that has amassed debt, and it's accelerating. And so this is why we have the country that we live in. I don't think it's because bad people are are electing a bad leader. I think the bad leader actually that bleeds off into the nation, and that's that anointing, and that's the anointing of leadership, right? So here we go back to 1776. We had zero debt in this country. We were just a baby.
Yep.
We were just a baby. We couldn't actually.
America still had that new country smell.
We did. We had the new country smell. Right. And so from 1776 until President Obama became president, we went from 0 to $11 trillion in debt.
Wow.
Well, from Obama until now, which has been what, 13 years maybe, we've gone from 11 trillion to 31 trillion.
Unbelievable.
I mean, so it's accelerating, right? And so this is the problem that we have. And it's not just the country, it's corporate America, it's banks, it's individuals. We're all just amassing debt. And it's not just here in America, it's a global thing. Yeah. So this is why the cycle that we're seeing right now is so dangerous, because it's an implosion of debt. And it's on a global scale. And it's like the system is so broken that they're going to have to reset it completely. And this is, I think, the times that we're living in. Wow. And this is just math to me. It's just logic. We just happen to be the generation that's alive to see it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not like it's some kind of a rogue podcaster, uber conservative podcaster that's saying the government's evil and this is going to happen, and coming up with all these bogus theories and whatever else, right? No, this is actually real. It's just math. The debt is unsustainable.
Yeah. Would you say it's similar to like a family, a household? If let's say we're both working, raising kids, and Stacy stopped, so we lost that income, but we kind of kept the expenses the same, and every time we would get in a pinch, like we really want to go to Disney, but the credit cards are maxed. I guess I could apply for a new one, and you get a new credit card. And it's like, oh, and probably to the outside world, it would look like, man, the Whiteheads are still doing great, man. They just got back. I saw pictures on Facebook. They were in Disney World, and like everything kind of feels the same. Like we're not really in a financial struggle. We're still going to dinner. We're going out to eat. We still have the new car. Everything looks great. And then, but every time we're in a pinch, it's like, oh, maybe we get another line of credit on the house. Right. And it's like, then we use that up. And then it's like, oh, there's never any going backwards. And we didn't, it went up, I'm the biggest Donald Trump person in the world, but it's not like our debt went down those 4 years, necessarily. I mean, we raised the debt ceiling without a blink. Nobody even talked about it. We just that's a little bit of like just acceptable. And so is it kind of like that, but just on a big scale? And eventually though, there comes a time where
then you get a time to pay the piper?
Where we got to sit down and talk. And it's like, babe, here's the deal. We're making $80,000 a year and we owe $350,000.
Did that happen like Hemingway or something? Like an author?
It did. It did happen to Ernest Hemingway, and one of the most prolific authors of all time. And he filed for bankruptcy. Yeah. And before he died, a reporter was asking him about his life, right? And said, well, how did you file for bankruptcy? What happened? And his answer was, well, it started slowly, and then it just happened. Right? Well, and that's the case for where we are right now, right? Yeah. So here's the difference between families and the government. So if you had this story, you make $80,000 a year, you have $350,000 in debt.
I don't know if that's possible, but that'd be a bad spot to be in.
That would be a bad spot.
That's how I feel as our government.
Well, it is possible. I mean, anything's possible. People just spend way too much, right? But you would sit down and say, okay, our income is static. We can't go out and really get another job. We're already working full time. So therefore, we have to cut our spending. We have to make adjustments. The government doesn't think like that because they have a printing press. Yeah. So they never look at the expense side. They always look at the revenue side. And there's a couple of ways in their mind to make revenue. One's a real way and one's a fake way. So the government makes revenue through taxation. Right? It's like, well, we could raise taxes. Yep. Well, when people are taxed out of their mind already, you can't really raise taxes anymore, or else it will reduce government revenue because we just will curtail our spending when our bottom line goes down. So the other way then they do it is they just go to the printing press and they print their way out of it, which is what they've been doing that causes more inflation and everything. This is where we are right now. So now you've got these just like every single year, this May and June was no different, right? Debt ceiling talks. The only thing that's different this time is the political backstabbing got extreme. And McCarthy and Biden are sitting there talking. It's like, no, we're not gonna budge. And you see on TV Biden's old comments from like 2011 said, we have to negotiate. The two sides need to get along and talk about raising the debt ceiling.
Come on,
well,
man.
this time it's like, we're not negotiating. You know, the press secretary is saying, this is not something we're going to negotiate on. And what do they want to negotiate on? It's like, well, you've got to cut expenses or the GOP is never going to raise the debt ceiling. So this went on for a couple of weeks. Then McCarthy says, all right, well, we'll probably raise the debt ceiling, but we need to see proof that you're going to cut expenses. It's like, okay, they can say it, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it never happens.
Yeah.
They always raise the debt ceiling. And here's the reason why, especially now, we're in a pre-election cycle.
Yeah.
So imagine running on this campaign. It's like, well, yeah, the economy shut down under my watch. We basically mismanaged money so bad we had to shut it down. But please vote for me.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is why they never stop the debt. They always keep raising the debt ceiling because they want to get reelected. And when you look at the expenses that were due on June 1st, so June 1st is when Janet Yellen said, we're running out of money. The government's going to have to shut down.
Is it May 1st or June 1st?
It was June 1st.
June 1st of
June
2020
of 23.
20. Okay.
So this like right now, right? So June 1st of 2023, she said, we're government's running out of money. If we don't raise the debt ceiling, the government's going to shut down. So the cynical side of me says, sweet.
Yeah.
If the government shut down, they're not going to spend any money.
You're inner Ron Swanson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
But the ugly side is $80 billion in expenses were due on June 1st, and they only brought in $18 billion.
Oh.
So this is the discrepancy. June 2nd, it was kind of a similar number. It's like, man, but what were the expenses for? The expenses were for veterans benefit, government retirements, Medicare, Social Security benefits. So this is why politicians are so reluctant to ever not raise the debt ceiling, because these are all the voters. And good people get hurt because of bad financial management by our country. So they always raise the debt ceiling because of that. Because those people are voters and these politicians want to get reelected. So therefore, they keep kicking the can down the road. And so McCarthy was kind of buckling and said, yeah, we'll probably just raise it, but we have to have some kind of a promise moving forward. I doubt they're ever going to get that, right? And then President Trump said, under no circumstances should you raise the debt ceiling this time, right? So now you've got this political backfighting. But he's right?
Yep.
We should not keep encouraging them and rewarding them for financial mismanagement. But what are the negative consequences, right? We a lot of times we don't hear about, well, what happens if the government does shut down? Well, all of the interest payments that we would make to people who own U.S. treasuries would stop. Who owns U.S. treasuries?
China.
Japan. The Federal Reserve is the largest owner of U.S. treasuries on the planet. Japan is the largest country that owns U.S. treasuries. China is the second largest country. Wow. State pensions have a ton of U.S. treasuries. The federal government pension system has a ton of U.S. treasuries. Imagine all the people that are impacted by not getting those payments. It is a big deal. But when you have a quasi-ally like Japan, they're probably not going to do anything except get mad. China hates us from the jump, pretty much politically. Yeah. And so they've got a big, strong military and a nuclear power. When you start stealing money long enough from a strong military country that's a nuclear power, financial problems lead to political problems lead to geopolitical problems, which is usually war, right? So this is where we are in this life cycle of our debt, and we're going to start ticking off some other countries pretty soon.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about your 2 PhDs, because you have 2 PhDs, and I want to talk about for such a time as this, because the things that you're talking about, the things we talked about earlier, they like come together like puzzle pieces. So tell us.
Probably more so than you ever intended.
I know.
I mean, even your own path has got to only make sense looking back.
Yeah. It really does.
So tell us about your 2 PhDs and why did you get 2 PhDs?
I mean, so first, when I graduated from University of Colorado, I decided I want to go get a master's degree. And I picked the University of Denver because this is going to sound crazy, but they were the most globalist place that I could find.
Interesting.
Because I knew what I believed as a believer.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wasn't going to be swayed. I was strong enough in my faith. So I wanted to learn how the enemy thought, so to speak. Right?
Yep.
And so that particular school that very few people are admitted every year, but Condoleezza Rice went there, Madeleine Albright went there. Most of the Clinton advisors were like professors. I mean, it was a big time globalist institution.
You were like Daniel in the lion's den right there.
I learned a lot, and I learned a lot. But what I wanted to do is learn how the other side thought.
Yeah.
Because it's the best way to counteract that is if you understand your enemy. It's like okay, you're football players, right? So if you're the Cleveland Browns, and pretty much everything on your team stinks, except for Chubb, the running back, you're gonna run it up the middle every single time, right? So it's like, okay, they understood what the opposition was all about, and so they master that, right? So that's what I wanted to do. So then I got my master's degree in international politics, international studies, and then I decided I was going to go into the mortgage world, right? So that happened for a little bit, and we were very successful, but God had different plans, different reasons why that company wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And so I left because God's my provider, not then. I'm not going to support somebody that I don't agree with philosophically, right? So I went into financial services world, right? And being a wealth manager. And it was then that I went to a company that started to sell gold and silver. So to answer this question, right, it's a longer answer, but I was promised a book of business, right? Okay. The book of business that I got was a phone book.
Oh, man.
It's like, man, this is not what it's all cracked up to be. Yeah. So 250 phone calls a day for 3 years.
Wow.
And during this time, I'm watching CNBC, and Jim Cramer is just like shouting from the rooftops and yelling and screaming, and people listening to him because he's on TV. So I thought, how can I get on TV?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, nobody on TV has a PhD except like boring Harvard nerds talking about policy. It's like, I'm a little more exciting than that. So it took me 7 years or so, but I got a PhD, public policy administration. It was because I wanted to have more impact and influence than just sitting behind a desk making phone calls, because God had built something different into me.
Yeah.
And then because truly I'm a glutton for punishment.
So what was the first degree? What was it?
Public policy administration, focusing on monetary economics. So I developed a new methodology for measuring inflation, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, their version is broken. I mean, we've talked about that a bunch on this show. It's just, it's meaningless because they keep substituting stuff and understating inflation. Goes back to Clinton in 1996. He changed the way inflation was measured. So I wanted to fix it. Okay. And so, basically boil it all down, if you take the current CPI, multiply it by about 2.8, it'll give you a true inflation number. And that's the bottom line. Man. So then I decided to get a second PhD, because if one is good, two might be better.
Yeah, it's got to be better, yeah.
No other reason. but that one was in theology.
And what made you decide theology?
I love studying the word, right? It's part of who I am. And I thought, if I'm studying it all the time and I'm just like a student at heart, it's like, well, I might as well get a degree from it.
Wow. So
we did. And that one, I produced a documentary called 300 Million Slaves that was basically telling the clergy to wake up. Because people back when Obama became president, the evangelical Catholic community fell asleep at the wheel. And they were afraid to talk about truth from the pulpit. And it's like, speak the truth in love. You don't have to be afraid about losing your nonprofit status. Remember the Lois Lerner days? I mean, that's when I was doing that. And it's like, you don't have to be afraid. Always speak the truth, but speak the truth in love. Don't be uber judgmental about things. And watch what happens, because politics and economics are a function of your spirit person too, right? Yeah. So all of these intersect into this whole person of who we are, because what you see, like with me personally, is the same as what you see professionally, is the same as my spiritual side. It all blends together as one. It can't be separated. So I just wanted to wake up the clergy and say, don't be afraid. Right. Just simply don't be afraid. Yeah. Right. So anyways, that was what my second PhD was.
That's critical. Now, you've also written 4 books. And obviously today we're focused on, this new book, Thriving in the Economic Tsunami. And I'd like to kind of get into a piece of this right out of the gate, because you also give very practical advice. I suggest this for everybody out there. This is a gift for young couples just getting married. It's a gift if you're an investor. It's a gift, you could do, you can almost do it like a home study, with it, the way this is laid out. But you have a little bit of a ludicrous number here in the beginning when we're talking about spending, and it has to do with a cup of coffee that costs somebody $2 million.
Right.
So maybe we kind of jump out of there and maybe kind of weave
story.
that into your 10, 70, 10, 10, principle. How could somebody possibly stomach the idea of paying $2 million for a cup of coffee?
No, well, nobody should. I mean, seriously, nobody ever should. But so the premise of that is,
but people do.
Yeah.
They do. So the premise of the $2 million cup of coffee is incremental steps get us to that point, right? And I was reading a book back when I wrote that chapter, The Millionaire Next Door. So the millionaire next door, they don't act like millionaires. They don't dress like millionaires. They don't drive cars like millionaires. You really don't know. But what does that mean? They've lived below their means.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they invest and they save and they're wise stewards with what God has given them. So here the two. So I got this idea. It's like, okay, what could do simple steps to actually, because whenever I talk to people, it's like, I don't have enough money for retirement. It's like, well, you just have to start. It's never too late to start. Right. But here's the premise. If you start early, so the $2 million cup of coffee, if you start at 18 and simply don't go to Starbucks or your favorite coffee shop every single day, right? Because the most expensive cup of coffee ever was a Starbucks, the 72 shot Frappuccino.
Whoa, are you serious?
I mean, it's truly death
That
in a
can't
glass.
be good
Is
for
that
somebody.
for one person to drink?
Yeah, one person. It's like death in a glass. It's
Oh.
like, I don't know how.
You probably get so much done though.
Oh man, you could get.
You only work one day a month.
No, but I think that
tear your
thing was
shoes up.
like $80-something or whatever the number is on
my
that. I mean, it's
goodness.
expensive, but we're just talking about a single cup of coffee, with like a single Frappuccino or whatever, like $4.86.
Okay.
Whatever it costs, right?
Yeah.
So every single day, 5 days a week, you go to work, you stop at a coffee shop in the morning and spend
Which
your
a lot of Americans
$4
do.
and something
Yeah.
cents. Well, if you were to invest that every day rather than drink it, at a compounded interest rate of 11% a year was my assumption, which is normal throughout time. I mean, right now in silver, we're up 20% in 3 weeks.
Right.
We're up, 40-something% in 6 months. But 11% a year. By the time you're 65, if you were to just cut out your cup of coffee, it would have been $2 million.
Wow.
So that truly is a
Yeah.
$2 million cup of coffee. So apply that to your life. It's like, well, I don't go to Starbucks. I don't go to Dazbog Coffee. I don't go to any of these coffee
Right.
shops. It's like, well, what do you
What
have that
are
you
you
could cut
doing?
out?
Yeah.
What is your coffee?
Right.
Because when you
thing.
talk to people like our grandparents that went through the Depression, and you see them like reuse their aluminum foil and they wash out the Ziplocs and this kind of things,
Yeah.
and you see people who've actually really gone through hard times.
Yes.
Our hard times today are like, we can only, our kids don't have new iPhones,
Yeah.
or something, ridiculous, because they just break these things up into payments. People don't even buy their phones anymore. It's just,
Right.
so there's that disconnection though between life is hard and this is immediate.
Yes.
This cup of coffee versus, that retirement thing's a long ways down the road. And what difference is $4? They can't make that connection there. And they don't know what they would cut out to create that because everything built in is now a necessity. We have to do this, or I like this brand of beer. I like this.
Yeah.
I got to have, Direct TV. Whatever, everybody has something,
Everybody does. Everybody has something. And that's the point of this. It might not be coffee, but maybe you could go from the highest cable plan to the middle one.
Right.
Maybe every time you go to the gas station, you get a Coke, a fountain drink, or a candy bar or something. Well, stop that.
Yeah.
I mean, that you can find something that you could probably save $5 a day on. I mean, literally. And that equates to about $2 million by the time
If
you
somebody
retire.
starts in their 20s.
Well, yes.
Stacey used to teach a lot of
18 to
weight loss
65.
classes around small groups and stuff. This is in the mid 2000s, and she's a great coach. And one thing she had people do is journal. Just for like for 2 weeks or a month, however long they do it, they journaled everything that they ate, and people were shocked at how much they cut the crust off their kid's sandwich. and they'd all just eat
instead of
that.
throwing it away, they would, eat it themselves. Like, I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Yeah.
Like they weren't aware of like, oh man, I'm probably taking in extra 800 calories a day that's not even on my grid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of what people are always shocked, by that number of the little bits, the little raindrops that make puddles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the scariest exercises in the world that you can do is look at your checkbook.
Yeah.
I mean, if you truly analyze your checkbook every single month, it will show you what you value.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be shocked as to, I had no idea I spent this much money on this garbage. Right? I mean, you really will.
Advice.
Because who you are inside is a reflection of what you spend money on, right? That's what you value.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where what I try to encourage people to do: live below your means, and it's like a simple 70-10-10-10 principle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
break
what
break
does that
down
mean?
for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So living on 70% of your income, that's your
that
expenses,
pays your house payment,
your taxes, everything,
Okay.
right? So people say, well, that's impossible to do. It's like, no, it's not. Remember, I was so far below zero. I just wish I could have been to zero.
Yeah.
I remember one time Jolene went to McDonald's, and I'm aging myself here, but they had a sale on hamburgers for 25 cents.
This was in the 40s.
This was a while ago.
This was in the
right?
late 1900s, probably.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I don't know, there may be 75 cents at the time, but they were on sale for some whatever reason.
Some ridiculous price.
So she said, can I get one? And it's like, we can't afford it. But how do you tell your wife no to a 25-cent hamburger?
Right.
It's like, hey, but we couldn't even afford that.
Man.
Right. So that's when I broke down and decided we got to give more. So, so taxes, living expenses, everything on 70. Then what are the 10-10-10? 10 is what you give.
Yeah.
Give of your first fruits.
Well, in your book, you actually listed as 10, 70, 10, 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you
said
first.
the first is the tithe. Yeah.
Not to correct you on your own book, but I'm a student.
Yeah, no, so there's 70, 10, 10, and 10, but the first 10 of everything that you make right off the top. And people argue with me about this as well. Should I give 10% off of my net or off of my gross? Because I have to pay tax. It's like, if you're concerned about net versus gross, then you don't understand giving.
Yeah. Right.
Just give it right off the top
Mm-hmm.
and watch what God does,
Mhm.
right? So 10 first, 70% is what you live on, and then 10% to invest for the long term. This is your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, long term doesn't mean like next 2 weeks.
No,
We're for your summer vacation.
no. So that's the last 10.
That's the last 10.
The last 10 is savings, something that you're
Right.
short term, your vacation,
Mhm.
you're saving up for a car, you're saving up for something, you're saving up for a dress or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But 10% to give, 70% to live, 10% for retirement, 10% for short-term savings.
What about like Christmas? Is that short-time savings?
That would be short-time savings.
Because the 10% you're putting away for retirement, like that's not to be touched.
That should not be touched
Mhm.
until retirement.
Mhm.
And that's the $2 million cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine what it would be if you could do $10 a day.
Right.
I mean, or anything
Mhm.
other than the $4.86 or whatever
Mhm.
the example was in the book, right? It's like, imagine if you could just do more. And once you start realizing this, it kind of becomes a game to a lot of people and a challenge.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah.
I can do more than that. I can really do more than that. But when I say live on 70% of your income, that freaks people out because it's that I can't even live on 100% of my income.
Right.
It's like, of course you can't. Of course you can't. You're not giving.
Mhm.
God, like you said, Stacy, God wants us to test him
Yep.
on the principle of giving.
Mhm.
And watch, you can do it.
Right.
You can simply do it, and you start to change the way that you think.
Mm.
Rather than keeping up with the Joneses, trying to get the nicest
good.
car, you will learn to live within 70%. Your house is going to be a little bit smaller. And then, but when you do it right, over time, you could sell that house and get something bigger. And then you sell that house and get something bigger if that's what you really want.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But just don't ever get into too much debt. Pay off your credit card every single month because the cost of debt can be stifling in a chokehold on your future growth. I mean, interest
Great
payments can
advice.
eat us alive, just like it is with the federal government,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's going to eat us alive. Just this year alone, the interest on our national debt, as interest rates have doubled over last year, is pushing $1 trillion a year, just in interest-only payments. A year ago, it was $400 billion.
Wow.
So but interest rates have gone up a lot. They've more than doubled. So of course, the debt service is going to more than
Yeah.
double as well.
when our son Colton I don't know if he'd been on his own for a few years, and it's right around the time he got married, and then we had breakfast every week, and we'd meet and kind of sync up and how's it going in your life, and kind of, things he had heard in the past also now applied at a different level now that life no longer playing with like Nerf bullets is like real bullets, and what's going on and this kind of stuff. But he made the comment to me, he said, it never made sense to me until now, but growing up, I always kind of wondered how we were doing. He says, because sometimes I felt like we were rich because we would do a nice thing or we would take a trip or we would do a thing. And in my mind, I'm like, we must be doing pretty good. And then other times based on things you would say no to, or you thought was ridiculous, or you wouldn't pay that much for something, I thought we were poor. Mm. And he goes, so I was wondering if we were rich or we were poor. He goes, I really didn't know. He goes, because if I would have had the money to do something, I would have said yes to it. And the idea of having the money to say yes, but not saying yes, it didn't make sense when I was like in high school.
Yeah.
And how could we have money, but say, no, I'm not going to get the extra whatever.
That's ridiculous.
Or that's ridiculous. Because some things I'd be like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to pay that much money for that because it's not a value.
Right.
Or that's not in our budget to do. I could afford to do it, but I'm saying no now for a future yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that idea didn't really kind of sink in until he started like,
managing his own money.
He's like, oh, well, I want to do this nice thing. So it means I better say no here, but you can't say yes to everything.
It
can't be all yeses.
And as parents, we want to always, this is hard for parents to do. It really is. When your kids want something, you love them so much. And it's like, I just want to get them that little thing, right?
It's like Joe with that hamburger.
It is. It's like Joe with the hamburger. Yeah. And I'm a softie and I always generally give him. But my daughter was telling me just a few weeks ago, she said, Dad, I'm so glad that you didn't actually give us everything and you taught us delayed gratification, because she now has that today and she understands the value of money, and they learn that the hard way, like all of us do. Like my son, I can remember stories when he was young and he always wanted something and he was saving up for it, and without fail, he'd go to the gas station. It's like, I want this gum. It's like, oh, why are you spending $1.50 on a pack of gum?
Right.
It's like, aren't you saving up for a baseball glove or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I just want this. And then you get all this candy. And it's like, then he never could get what he really wanted, because the shiny, attractive nuisance, the sparkly thing would always get him.
Yep.
Right. But he learned.
Exactly.
He learned after a few times. It was like, I'm never getting what I really want because I
those are
don't
great
wait.
lessons.
I know, it's so great. But it's sad when you don't learn those as young and you go into adulthood and you still haven't gotten out of that mindset because your parents never taught you that.
Yep.
Right. And that's what we have to deal with. I think a lot of our politicians, their parents never taught them.
They never taught them.
Obviously. Because
and they're not dealing with their own money. They're dealing with all of our money.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to spend somebody else's money.
It's easy to spend somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to politicians, because their yes is kind of what does get them reelected.
Right. Yeah.
And I think some parts of that system, are kind of flawed. Part of it is the way that we're also programmed as people to be like, well, I want him to get elected, but you're not come back on anything that I want.
Right.
They need to quit spending, but there will not be a pothole on my street.
Yeah.
Or whatever the thing is.
Right.
So let's talk about end game, because ultimately what you're about is not about a transaction. You develop relationships with people for life.
Correct.
And so you're kind of picking up where their parents left off a little bit, and you're advising and working them through these things. But ultimately the goal is, you can't eat gold and silver. You're it's not going to keep you warm on a cold winter night or any of these things, and so it's like the goal of life isn't, hey, can I have a bunch of gold and silver? The goal in life is like, eventually I want to be self-sustaining at a point where maybe I can't physically produce income. I mean, there's some version of that. Talk about the end game a little bit and how you kind of work people towards, like, what is the real goal here?
Well, there's two different end games. You've got the government's end game and you've got our end game. So our end game should simply be, we need enough so we can live comfortably, not excessively, comfortably. But that doesn't mean that God wants you poor.
Right.
Right. Again, the whole, how does money fit into your framework? So he wants you to live an abundant lifestyle, an abundant mindset, and don't get abundance mixed up with things. Because abundance means that you have what you need and then you have
And
a
enough.
ton to give away.
That's good.
Right, which is why I encourage people to live on 70% of their income, so they have enough to give. You know, but if you don't give, you're never going to have enough. You're just never going to have. It starts there, period. And it's a mindset, right? When you're a giver, it's like, I've got plenty, and I need to give more away. When you're not a giver, it's like, I'm always seeking more and more and more and more. And you just never have enough, right? It's weird how God plants that into our minds. So the end game, David, is simply, let's get through life and maximize each and every day.
Okay.
The only way you can maximize a future is to maximize each and every day. Because people always say, oh, I want this great retirement and I just want to sit back on the beach and do nothing. Well, for me, it's like, all right, that whole concept of retirement, I'm never going to do it. I mean, I don't know if that's actually a biblical concept anyways, right? It's like God created us to produce.
Yeah.
He created us to change lives. He created us to be world changers. And if you're doing that, it's not work, right? So I'm never going to stop, right? But getting to the point where you're not driven by money is truly the end game, where you keep working even though you don't need the income. That's what I want to get people to.
That's huge.
That's one thing about the millionaire next door. Most millionaires still work.
Well, I just think it's really interesting. You know, we work a lot with Clay Clark, and he had an opportunity to speak with a Jewish man, who was talking about how they work. Like, they are people that work 6 days a week and they never retire. And he said that work for him is actually worship. So when he's working, it's worship unto the Lord. And so retirement would be a sin, because therefore you're stopping the worship. And I thought, what a great perspective. You know, so no matter what it is that somebody does for a living, you know, that is an act of worship. So therefore it's no longer really about the money. It's about you're worshiping the Lord with your work.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And retirement's never been good for people anyway. You see, a lot of times people retire and then they die.
They waste away because they're not doing what they were created, called, anointed, and gifted to do. And they just wither away into nothing. It's like they bore themselves to death.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, keep doing. And the people that I know that are really old and really active are still healthy and vibrant, and they're active in their minds. And it's like, man, I can't believe that they're like 94.
Right.
I mean, that's the kind of, it's like, wow.
And yeah, I can talk to people like that we went to high school with sometimes, you know, and granted, I'm not like, you know, a spring chicken, but I'll talk to them like they're almost dead because there's no goal. There's no other than, they'll talk about a trip they took as like a good moment, but there's
without vision, the people perish.
Yeah. It's like there's nothing like, we love Table Rock and taking our grandkids and going on the lake and doing this kind of thing. But like, you know, you have to have a bigger vision for your life than to like not do anything for 3 days.
Right.
Or not do anything for a week.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, God created Adam and put him in a garden and he got to work, you know, and I don't even necessarily know what heaven's going to look like, but heaven can't look like some glorified version of the lockdowns, you know, just with gold streets.
That wasn't good for anyone.
No, it wasn't.
You talk to people, they're like, I gained weight during that time.
How many movies can you watch?
Right.
You know, how much can you watch, like a whole season of Lost or something, you know, in a weekend? It's like, okay, good. But then at some point you're like, I want to go out, like, you know, stick my head out the door like a gopher, you know, and it's like, hey, there's light out here. And like, you know, you want to, like, what can I do?
Right.
You know, most people feel better, like, you mowed the lawn and there's like straight lines. You're like, yeah, that feels pretty good. Or, you know, some version of that.
Accomplished something.
Yeah, you're like, you know, hey, I did something today, you know. You kind of feel, it feels better to do than to not do. But for some reason we get a thing, you know, where our work is just something we have to do. Like, I'm going to do as little as possible. I don't want to get fired. You know,
try to get paid as much as I can.
And some boss is going to pay you as little as they can so you don't quit. And there's like this adversarial relationship, but you don't necessarily attach it to worship. We're a reflection of who you are. You know, it's like, well, if they paid me more, I would do better around here. Versus like, how about just do better because that's who you are, and just become so good they can't afford you anymore, and you just keep moving on. Like, but the idea of work being, you know, an act of worship.
Well, do everything as if unto the Lord.
Yeah.
Right. So people who are complaining about their work all the time, it's like, you're not viewing it right.
Yep.
Because there's a principle in the scriptures of God will not give you more than what you can handle. Right. You're not going to be rewarded if he can't trust you with the small things. You're never going to get the big things.
Yep.
So do the small jobs with everything you've got, and then you're going to advance. And you'll get a bigger job. Then you'll get a bigger job, right? If you're always grumbling and complaining and not doing, you're never going to really advance through life and get to this end game of freedom. I mean, that's what it really is. When you get to work and you don't care about making money because you've already made what you need, and you just work because you love what you're doing, that is truly the end game, and that's ultimate freedom. Right? Yep. Where the government's end game is anti-freedom. Right. The government's end game, and what we're seeing now with the Great Reset and everything else, is complete control of you, what you spend your money on, how you think, getting rid of private capital in the banks, having you do an end run around that to go directly to the government for your assistance. Right? I mean, this is what they want. Yep. It's opposite of freedom. So we just take that opposite spirit and run with it, because this is how God created us, with an end game in mind of complete freedom, freedom in our minds, freedom economically, freedom with our friends, freedom of your time. And what do you do with it? I believe that God will show you what to do with it each and every day, because he will want you to maximize every single day so you can maximize the future. No way you can maximize the future if you're not maximizing every single day.
I remember you saying, we saw a little kid, maybe like a 6-year-old, run across the room. Like they were just standing here just talking, and all of a sudden they just ran across the room to go do something else, to go play with their toys or whatever. And you said, you just don't see adults do that very much. And I said, why is that, do you think? And you said, well, because they're debt free. I just thought, more people, if you didn't have that stress of finances and debt and all of that, I got to do this because I got to have this money because I got to pay this bill, because I got to pay this credit card. Just the stress of that on your life.
Yeah. And a lot of it's debt. And people make choices in debt that they wouldn't have otherwise. I think the pandemic really, magnified that, because you hear about some of these, we had on a guy the other day, and he did a documentary called Fluvid-19. And basically he's like, this correlation between flu numbers went to 0 and COVID numbers went up. And it's full of these clips I sort of forgot about. One of them's a lady with a camera, and she's talking to a pharmacist, and it's like, hey, can you show me the insert of what's all in the vaccine? And he's like, yeah. And he opens it up, and it's just, it's this big, but it's blank. And the pharmacist,
he was taken back.
He was like, this is wrong. Really? It's just, he was shocked, but he's given vaccines just as, like this. And he's like, he goes, I got to call and find out what, because she goes, I knew that was going to be blank, but I wanted to know why are you doing? Well, this is what they told me to do. And I'm going to find out why that's not in there. She goes, but why are you still giving the vaccines if you don't know what's in there? And he goes, but I shouldn't be. Nobody should be. He goes, I got to find out what's in here. But this is what they told me, and this is what I had to do. And he's in this. He's very nervous. His hands are fidgety. It's a part of this documentary. And I know that there's a lot of nurses, in that situation that was like, I don't, and doctors, I don't know if this remdesivir is playing out well. And like the Fauci procedure, a lot of people noticed there was a problem with the protocol inside the hospital and the outcomes they were getting early. But I noticed something else myself. When you saw doctors speak out, they were white-haired doctors. They were older doctors, and I think
paid off
there's got to be a
loans.
thing. It's like, man, you know what? You're telling mama, hey, I'm gonna get out of medical school, and we're gonna finally get a house, and you don't have to work 2 jobs, and we're gonna get here. It's like people get in a financial situation where it's like, hey, I would like to speak up here.
I got student loans,
but man, I got this student loan. Now we got 2 new cars. We got a mortgage. It's like, I can't. What am I gonna do? Go back and live with your parents if I stand up here? Like. My point in that whole discussion is people will make compromises in financial bondage that they wouldn't make if they were in a place of financial freedom.
Right.
And the things that fulfill a desire can quickly become a handcuff that makes you do something you wouldn't have normally done. And I think we saw that on a big scale these last 2-3 years.
I think it was the test, quite honestly. Because what's coming financially, what they have to offer us with central bank digital currency is worse than COVID. because it's complete command and control of everything that you spend your money on. Whether they like you or not, you can buy if they like you, or they can sell if you can't do anything without them giving you their blessing, right? This is what this is all about. See, and the reason I say that the COVID thing was a test is because they wanted to see how quickly the world would just bend over and take what they have, so to speak. And they did. They did because of fear, and fear will cause you to make the wrong decision, right? So this next time, here's what they have to offer. And what they have to offer is, let me ask you 3 questions. How many people trust the government right now, globally?
No, nobody would honestly say they do.
Probably not many.
Right.
I mean, is the answer. Probably not many. There's some that do, but most people don't.
Yeah.
How many people trust the banking system right now?
I don't think many.
Probably even less.
Yep.
Less every day.
Yeah.
Less every day as banks are failing and failing. Well, what if the people that have the government-run digital bank, this is what they're bringing to us, their leaders have said, this is programmable money, and we have the ability to cut you off from buying or selling if we don't like your digital social profile. So now you've got a government-run digital bank that has promised to cut you off from buying or selling, keeping you from your money. That's a hard message to swallow. Nobody would want that that's in their right mind. They wouldn't.
Nope.
However, given a big enough crisis, even that would be attractive. Because if you can't feed your family, if you can't pay your rent, if you can't pay your mortgage, if the only mechanism to get your Social Security or your government payments or Medicare or Medicaid was through this system, people say, all right, if it means that I can't live, or pay my bills, all right, I'll take your system.
Man, that's so interesting that you say that, because something that you said earlier jumped out at me, because I've heard David say it several times. You were talking about working for a company that you no longer agreed, or once you understood what they really stood for, you're like, I can't work here anymore. And you said, they're not my source. God is my source. And, David has said that so many times in our life. As a situation comes at me, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'll be taken back. What are we going to do? And they say, well, that's not my source anyway. God is our source. And you heard sometimes in the pandemic where somebody goes like, well, I worked this job and they said I have to get the shot or they're not going to pay me anymore. And so I have to take the shot, because what else am I going to do? Therefore, that job, that company became their source versus, okay, I'm not going to take the shot and I'll just trust God that something else is going to come along. And that goes right along with what you were saying right here. Who is your source? So even if we come across the CBDCs and it's like, that's the only way people are going to get their Medicaid or get any of these things, is the government your source or is God your source? So even in saying no to this, is God going to take care of me then?
Right. And I wish I could say that people would be different. Even when they know the potential outcome, sometimes they don't act properly. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria over the last 2 months, about 4 or 5 months ago, 0.5% of the population actually accepted and adopted their central bank digital currency, because they're rolling it out now, just like America is in other countries. Yeah. Well, now, as of last week, 60% adoption. So they went from 0.5 to 60%, the majority of their population. It's like, how in the world could they do that, right? The answer is disgusting. It'll turn your stomach. They starved out their population. Where in Nigeria, you need $40 a week to live, to survive. So they said $40 a month is your maximum withdrawal out of your bank account, unless you go with the system, right? So it's like, all right, so they're starving them out. So this is how they can force compliance. So this is why I said,
hungry people, man.
Hungry people will do whatever. If you can't get your Social Security, you can't get your Medicare, you can't get your government pension. If you're a military worker or education, school, state, federal, right? If you are taking government money, well, the only way for you to get it is through the FedNow app, which 4 big major money center banks are now unleashing to the public. And the Federal Reserve said this is going to actually be completely unveiled to small, medium, and large banks by July of this year, right? So they're rolling it out. This is the FedNow app. And so you've got the central bank digital currency repository, which is your debit and credit system. It's your money that's tied to your digital social profile, which tells them that's, some algorithm, some computer somewhere determining, David, Stacy, We don't like who you give to. We don't like the church that you give to. We don't like your political party. We don't like the kind of food you eat and your spending habits. Or we don't like the car that you drive because it doesn't get good enough gas mileage and your carbon footprint is too big, right? So they say no buying or selling for you, right, on certain things. So that's the where it's going.
Wow.
But
and this is already happening in China.
it's already happening.
Oh,
yeah.
It's already happening in China. So I was thinking about this just this morning when I was talking to you, and it's like, ooh, there's one other thing. What about your tax return? What about you get money back on your tax return if you overpay? Well, that's a government thing. What if they just say, well, you're not getting your refund unless you use this app? So they could almost 100% adoption of most people. They say, I've got my money out there and they're not giving me back unless I get this FedNow app on my phone. It's like, I mean, so it's easy. And as I was a kid, even as an adult, reading through the Bible, because I truly think, describe what I just said. The ability to cut you off from buying or selling unless you have this technological gizmo. And, this sounds like the mark of the beast.
It does.
I always would have thought that was impossible. And I used to read those verses as a kid. I'd be like,
how are they going to do that?
Were they just going to like see me and recognize me and not take my money?
Yeah.
Right.
People are always going to want to take your money.
Yeah. I mean, this is like Revelation 13,
like how
17.
would they even do that?
Yeah.
If this isn't it, I don't know what is, right? The ability in their own words to cut you off from buying or selling if they don't like you, right? Okay. So you've got that going on. It's like, as I was reading through prophecies as a kid and as an adult, it's like, how in the world could the Antichrist be a popular person? How could people actually like it when they would be so
evil.
blatant and evil and not allow you to buy or sell? It's like, who would want that?
Right.
Well, now it's like, well, I can see how this could happen like really easily.
Yeah.
Because COVID actually showed the whole world how much people will give up their freedoms like that.
Yeah.
For something that's
and
weird.
be angry at other people when they're not. Like I can remember, when people weren't getting the vaccine and other people that were getting the vaccine, they were like, well, don't take care of them. Take care of the people in the hospital that did get the vaccine. The other people, they're off by themselves, I mean, people turn pretty darn fast.
Jimmy
when
Kimmel,
hey,
if you're having a heart attack and you didn't get the vaccine, let them sit in the parking lot and die.
Yeah, I mean,
Jimmy Kimmel saying this on his show. Like, if you didn't get it, then you kind of deserve to die.
But not even just famous people like that. You would hear that from just a normal person on the street, hey, they didn't get the vaccine.
Somebody didn't have a mask on. They're Costco. They were spraying them with mace, and chasing them around. Just like, people kind of get weird with all that stuff.
Turned pretty fast.
There's two things. There's two things happening right now that kind of alert me to that whole situation. One, with these FBI whistleblowers coming out talking about the relationship between Bank of America specifically after January 6th and the federal government. There was over 3 million inquiries into private citizens going through their bank records that the banks just like the relationship behind the scenes between the FBI, the federal government, and the banks is like seamless. They're totally like, hey, what do you want to know about private citizens? They don't have privacy. All of their transactions are freely available to whatever you want to know, Mr. Government. And then number two, this thing that's kind of alerting me on this situation is when we're seeing these banks, we've had, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, then when Republic Bank, Chase swept in and gobbled them up right away. So it seems to me like where every time a little fish dies, a big one's going to eat them. So maybe eventually we're dealing with like only 4 fish in the whole ocean. And then it's kind of easy. There's less moves. Yeah. For people to make probably is kind of the goal there. It's like, well, where else would I if I were to leave Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, where would I even go?
Right. Well, you've got a lot of small independent bank owners, little mom and pops who aren't going to like this system. They're not going to like central bank digital currency.
Right.
It rubs them wrong like it does us. Yeah. Right. So it's hard. Let's say you're a shepherd in this field and you've got thousands of sheep that you are watching over. And you've got some that are drinking out of the river. You've got some that are chasing butterflies, some that are jumping off cliffs, some that are being chased by wolves or coyotes, right? Yeah. It's like, man, I can't corral everything.
Yep.
But if you only had 6 or 7 sheep, it's real easy to watch them. So this is the consolidation that's happening in the financial services world. Big banks are buying up middle banks are buying up small banks, right? So in the end, it's just going to be just a small number easy to corral, easy for them to be in cahoots with each other to bring in a new system. But this whole concept of consolidation is not just in the financial world.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing it politically, like with the BRICS nations. You've got countries willing to give up a portion of their national sovereignty or all of it to be part of a larger collective union.
And they're doing it quick.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it quick because they want that power. They want to be part of a winning team. So there's consolidation politically, there's consolidation financially, there's consolidation in media as well, in messaging. Because if your message isn't in lockstep with what the globalist agenda message is, well, off with your head. Look what Fox did to Tucker Carlson.
Yep.
I just heard Glenn Beck say this morning on his broadcast, since the day Tucker left, Glenn Beck's show on The Blaze has rated higher than Fox News.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And he's not the only one.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's many out there, you know, that are having that kind of growth, the kind of growth that we're having, you know, to be in 2 years and be getting millions of downloads a month. It's like people that's the alternative is rising, you know, but it's that consolidation because of the consolidation at the top. Because when Tucker left and Don Lemon was let go, I was like, Don Lemon with a little bit of PR grease could probably do something on Fox. He might could be on the 5, you know, or whatever. I could never see Tucker being able to say the things he was saying and be accepted on CNN.
No. He's not even accepted on Fox.
And so they're quickly like those two were moving there, and like Tucker was pushed to the side, but Don could have stayed where he was and just shifted over. I mean, he could make it on Fox. It wouldn't be a big stretch. We've not watched him a minute since the day Tucker left. You know, and I think a lot of others are the same. I can't believe the number of people I talked to at the ReAwaken America events that have gotten rid of cable. They're like, I really had cable because of this. If I'm not watching that, I'll just go to the streaming services only, and they're just getting rid of cable. Especially anybody that's like 50 and under. You know, is like, why do I even, it's a little bit like having a landline. It's like, why do I have this anymore? Like the last 2 times we moved, I never really used the landline, but it seems like what you do when you move in a new house, you get your phone line connected, but we didn't use it at the last house. Maybe I'll get rid of it here. You know, that's how people are feeling about cable, DirecTV, all of it.
Well, and if you talk to people who are in media, friends of ours, Laura Logan, Christy Lee, April Moss, right? They all come and basically they were silenced for speaking truth. There's been consolidation in messaging for a long time in media. Now it's just more prevalent, but everything in society is consolidating into one. And when you look at, even in the financial world, it goes one step further. And the World Bank came out with their central bank digital currency token 3 weeks ago called the Unicoin. So that's like the bank of banks, right? It's the World Bank. So now I think you're going to have these national, like the FedNow app here at the Federal Reserve. You've got the BRICS nations. You've got the European Union. And I think they're all going to start to ultimately, this is my theory, funnel into the World Bank's Unicoin. And have one global currency with just a few feeders, you know, the big countries' central bank digital currencies. And then that's the complete loss of freedom, loss of privacy, because it's now a global entity currency.
So I have to ask you then, I mean, how do people protect themselves? So they're hearing this and they're like, man, I'm on Medicare. I got this, I got that. What do I do, you know, in a situation like this? Because it's overwhelming and it seems pretty hopeless.
Yeah, here's where there is hope in this, though. Because I don't want people to hear the story and think, oh, my word, all hope is lost. Right. No, it's not. I mean,
that's what you got. I was going to point out again, I mentioned this earlier, but the title, the first word is thriving.
Thriving.
The word isn't like dying in the economic tsunami. Like you're acknowledging there's an economic tsunami. But your title is thriving.
You're talking about thriving, which, by the way, you can get on Amazon. That's the best place to get the book. Is that right? Is Amazon
just
right
go
now?
to
Thriving.
Amazon.
Available wherever you buy your books.
Tsunami.
But incredible, and it's nice and thin. This is one of those books, and it does have pictures. You could buzz through it pretty quick, and then feel really good about yourself. Like, you know, wow, I read a whole book this week. You know, and tell your friends, I've already read one book this week. What are you talking about? But it's a fast, fun read.
Well, it is fast, and it's meant for, you know, people who don't understand the precious metals world. A to Z, how do you do a precious metals IRA? How do you buy gold? How do you buy silver? understanding inflation, understanding different comparative asset classes like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate. When is it time to go into them? When is it time to not?
Yep.
All of that's covered in that book, right?
Yep.
So here's where, you know, and Stacy, you and I were talking about this briefly earlier. When we read through Revelation and Mark of the Beast and central bank digital currency, what does it say about that in God's word? It doesn't say that it's the only game in town.
This is such a great point.
Yeah, it says that if you should not take the mark of the beast, right? Don't buy or sell. There's bad results that come from that, right? But it doesn't say it's the only thing. It just says don't do it. So I think what's going to happen is, because God will never give us more than what we can handle, right? He is going to always create opportunities for us to thrive. And that means we have freedom to make choices. That's one of the things. God doesn't create a bunch of robots.
Right.
He created us with freedom of choice, right? So, yeah, I think central bank digital currency, as it comes, they're going to make it hard to not accept it. They're going to say, okay, if you want your tax return, get it. They're going to say, if you want your pension, if you want this, that, then you have to have this. It's like, man, it's really inconvenient to not do it. Even if you look at this year's tax return, look at the tax form from this year, and it has all these questions on digital currency. Have you ever traded in Bitcoin or other any kind of cryptocurrency? Have you received payment? Have you given payment? Do you invest in it?
And don't mess up.
And don't screw up.
Boy, exactly.
Because if you do, the penalties are severe.
Big,
I mean, it's like, oh my God, I got
strong language.
What if I miss something, right? What's going to happen? But yet, if you have a central bank digital currency, they already know everything about you. You don't have to fill out all these questions, right? It's because everything is known. Decentralized cryptocurrency is what they want to demonize. Centralized is what they want everybody into. And that's complete loss of freedom and privacy. So, of course, you don't have to fill out all that stuff if you have that, because they already know.
Right.
So they're going to make it real easy and convenient to accept their thing and difficult to go someplace else.
Yeah.
But nothing good in life is ever easy. You know, people don't reach their final destination with success by mistake.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Nobody ever.
In anything. Your lawn's not accidentally green.
Your marriage.
Your marriage isn't going to accidentally be incredible. Your kids aren't going to necessarily grow up and know how to use a fork and eat with their mouth closed accidentally. You know, it's like everything takes some intentionality.
Yeah. I mean, and I've had people calling me crying after they've heard a show. It's like, the mark of the beast. I can't believe it's here. I don't. What are we gonna do? I don't want to die. I don't want to take it. I don't want to blah blah blah. Right? It's like no. It's not. I think there's going to be more than one option, because God loves us too much, right? So He's going to give us a choice. Not that the choice is easy. Like in following Jesus, right? He never said that following Jesus was going to be easy.
Right.
He said it was going to be beneficial, right? In our eternity. So, and people will come against you all the time.
Or they don't come without sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll be persecution.
Is being married beneficial? Absolutely. Was this yes, a no? I said, yes. I'm going to say no to every other woman in the whole world.
Yeah. Thank you, sweetie.
Yeah. And you say yes to this one. You know, you say yes to, every yes is a no.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't calculate and weigh in that everything can't be all yeses and that every yes is a no, it's not, is it something easy? Is it worth it?
Right.
Is it worth exactly right?
It's like, man, I think investing in your marriage is the best value in the world.
Yep.
I mean, when it comes to even like ROI from a financial spreadsheet standpoint, it makes the most sense. If you want to have a long, financially productive life, work on your marriage. That's one of the best financial tips I can give people. Invest in your marriage heavily. Go on dates once a week. It's not very romantic. It's like, oh, because that'll give me that. No, it means you're not going to be losing half of your stuff.
Right.
And it means you're not going to be like walking out the door in a fight every morning, going to work, and you're not as productive because your heart's broke every day. You know, it's like, how about take care of that first and then branch out? It's like financial tips. So like, these are all, it's not, is it easy? Is it worth it? And that's the kind of options God gives us. Walking, man, you got to pick up your cross and follow Christ. Well, that's not easy. Boy, is it worth it.
Yep.
So almost always, it's very easy to make the wrong decision. It's very hard to make the right one, right? It's just weird how it happens that way. But even, in investing, people look at the ROI. You just talked about that. I would encourage people to look at your EROI, your return on investment, right? And what you're building into other people, right? So it's just a difference in mindset. But as the central bank digital currency is concerned, there's going to be other choices, whether it's using silver as barter, whether there's a gold-backed currency, whether there's some kind of other cryptocurrency that rises up, or maybe a quantum financial system that a lot of people are talking about. I don't know. Mm-hmm. All I know is that I don't think there's going to be just one game in town, because there's no choice in that. Mm-hmm. God likes us to have a choice, so we can then decide, and we can either be blessed or not by our own choices, right? Mm-hmm. So people who are calling me crying, it's like, I can't believe that I'm alive when there might be the mark of the beast. It scares me. It scares the living daylights out of me. It's like, don't be scared. Right. I think there is going to be a choice, and you just have to choose properly. Mm-hmm. Don't choose the easy path, the nice wide path. So choose the narrow one. Mm-hmm. Choose the one that's harder, that's less convenient, but it's going to be so much more beneficial, just like what you said, David.
So let's talk a little bit about actually gold and silver. And I want to kind of paint this context here for a second, because you're kind of known as like gold and silver guy, but you could be doing anything.
Sure.
Yeah. It's like, if I could come to you with any kind of you could advise me in investing and go a million different directions. But I guess before we go there, let's just kind of go back to even like money. Mm-hmm. Like maybe even like 1,000 years ago, 800 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Like people have always needed, okay, well you've got a goat. I'll trade you 12 chickens or something. There's like this, but it's kind of inconvenient. And so this idea of okay, I have a net worth of X amount of whatever. But it was always weighed in gold or silver or something valuable, because it was tangible. Mm-hmm. They wooden coins, weren't probably going to be, valuable, because they're all over the place. So gold and silver, but it was inconvenient for travel and carrying around with you. Somebody's going to come along with a baseball bat and bam, took all your net worth, right? And it's kind of heavy to carry.
Right.
And so the idea of like, I'm in Kansas City, and if I was going to go to St. Louis, for a trip, I can't take all my money with me, so I might take my gold and silver and I give it to an institution, and they probably give me a piece of paper, and when I get to St. Louis, they say, this guy's good, this guy's solid for X amount of units of whatever, because they're promising this guy in St. Louis that they're holding gold and silver for me or something of value. Is that kind of basically how kind of money came along? And then you got these old promissory notes of I can't carry the gold with me, but I need something that says, okay, hereby says it's got Kirk's seal. Kirk says I'm good for this amount of money. And if I'm short, Kirk will back it up.
Right.
Some version of that. And then we've just kind of been jockeying with that all along to kind of end up where we are today. And we've always had these fiat currencies because it's easier to carry around, but none of them work out long term.
They don't work out long term, and currency is just a means of exchange. That's all that it is. So to have something that qualifies as a currency, it has to be small, portable, valuable, scarce, and something that other people would recognize. I mean, that's all it is. So it could be beads. You could use bullets as currency. You could use vodka as currency. It might not be convenient, but it could be portable. You can carry it around. Other people recognize what it is, right? So you could use a lot of stuff for currency. This is like a barter economy. So, but that becomes confusing because everything is different. One day, some guy might say, well, yeah, you can have 5 dozen eggs for 1 bottle of vodka. But the next day, it's like, I don't need any more vodka. I just got it. So today, 5 dozen eggs is going to be 72 bullets because I'm out. Or the next day, it could be, I don't need any of that. But you're a farmer, give me like a 5-gallon pail of grain for these eggs. I mean, it's exchange, but it becomes really awkward. So this is where coinage came into play way back thousands and thousands of years ago, right? Well, that becomes heavy. And in society, we start looking for convenience, right? Just like we are now. Sure. So that barters type weird stuff turned into coins. Coins turned into paper dollars. Paper dollars turned into credit cards. Credit cards turn into a digital thing or a chip on your hand or anything else, right? It just becomes getting easier and easier and easier and easier. So this is where we're headed. So it's come to a point though now, the easier something gets, and everything changed in 1944. Well, actually, everything changed in the early 1900s with the Federal Reserve Act.
Okay.
Here in America.
Which
central
the Federal
banks,
Reserve's not even part of the government, is that right?
No, it's not federal, nor is it reserve.
It's good. It's good branding, though.
Yeah,
Good
no
marketing.
kidding.
I mean, it's a good name for what they want it to.
Yeah, because it creates this image of like, oh, well, Federal Reserve. That sounds like.
Yeah, they got money backing the country and it's part of the government. It's like neither is true. It's basically a cartel owning 7 families that own this, and they tricked the Congress into saying, oh yeah, let's pass the Federal Reserve Act. And we'll print the money and charge the government interest, the U.S. Treasury interest to print the money. It's like, wait a second. It's like the best gig ever.
That's a sweet racket right there.
Yeah, because now they're all worth trillions of dollars, right? Imagine the bankers that own the Federal Reserve and keep printing money out of thin air, keep charging the U.S. government interest, which is us.
Yeah.
Right? So that changed everything for America. Then... But before that, we were backed by gold. We had a currency that was backed by gold. And you could interchangeably use 1 ounce of gold or a $20 bill. And the key is, what would it buy you, right? So this is the insidious hidden tax of inflation that I'm about to describe. So back in the 1920s, 1 ounce of gold has a $20 face value on it.
Okay.
Or a $20 bill. You could go to Sears, you could go to the bank, you could do whatever you wanted to, whatever was around back then. Get a finely tailored men's suit, a shirt, a tie, a belt, and shoes, right? That's what that would buy you. But you fast forward to today, $20, you can't even get a pair of socks.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
But the 1 ounce of gold at close to $2,000 an ounce still gets you
that same thing.
This shirt, tie, belt, shoes, suit, right? It maintained its purchasing power. So first and foremost, gold is an insurance policy against an inflationary collapsing currency. But we got rid of that backing for the Federal Reserve because it was cumbersome. They wanted to print more money. They wanted to make more money because it was racket. So then they just printed without discretion. But you could still exchange gold for international settlements until 1971, when Nixon closed that window too, because we owed France a bunch of money, and France said, we want it paid back in gold. And a lot of people blame Nixon for the inflation we have today because he said, nah, I'm closing the gold window. We don't even have to have that anymore. Well, I understand why he did it. He said, nah, we're not going to give you our valuable gold. We're going to give you our stinking currency, right? So I get why he did it. But when he closed that gold window altogether, it changed things. So now there's no tangible backing until 1973. So in 1973, the petrodollar emerged, and we're now back, basically the world's reserve currency. We're basically settling all oil settlements in U.S. dollars, built-in demand for our currency. Okay, so that means if Brazil's buying oil from Russia, well, they're paying for it in U.S. dollars. Well, with the emergence of the BRICS nations now over the last year, they're dismantling that.
Which is Brazil, Russia, India,
China, South Africa.
And there's maybe a dozen more that have joined.
No, like more like 20 or 30 that are now petitioning because
just those original 5, that's like 41% of the world.
Yeah. And now it's we're pushing 60, 70% of the world with all the other countries. So why does this matter? They want to change the BRICS nations want to be the world's reserve currency because look what it did to America. It created this great economy, this great country. But it also created a bunch of debt because we squandered it. Right? We squandered our time in the sun. But you can't just step up to the mic and say, I'm President Xi from China, and we want to be the world's reserve currency. Doesn't work that way. You have to have a strong military. You have to have a strong economy. You have to have a strong political clout behind you. Well, individually as those countries, none of them have it. But collectively, they do. So first framework completed. Second framework in the financial world, for something to be born, something needs to die. So they're now killing the U.S. dollars, the petrodollar, with all these bilateral trade agreements between Brazil and China, between India, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, between India and Russia, between Poland and Russia, between Italy and Russia. Now Japan is dealing with Russia, and instead of the G7 nations. I mean, all of this dismantling of demand, which means we still have expenses. We still have entitlements. We still have to raise the debt ceiling. So we're going to have to print our way out of it. So now our currency keeps being devalued. Inflation, they raise interest rates to slow that down. All of this goes to currencies ultimately die. So we're at the point where nobody wants our currency anymore because we've had to print our way out of it so much it devalues it. It's now viewed as monopoly money. And so what are they coming in with? The knight on a shiny white horse coming in to save the day is central bank digital currency. And I'm telling you, that won't do anything other than make matters worse because they're not fixing the problem. Central bank digital currency is a digital version of paper money, but it's easier to create digital money because still with paper money, you have to make the paper, put it in the printing press, put ink on it, cut it, wrap it with the band, and give it to the banks. There's a process. Where digital money, to create $1 trillion in paper, it's hard. To create $1 trillion on paper, it's just
add the zeros.
Add zeros.
So people are thinking okay, I'm going to start saving more. I'm going to get ahead. They're putting money, in a shoebox, whether it's your savings account at your bank, which is vulnerable to the bank, or in a literal shoebox, in your mattress. The question I would have is, if you could go back to 1920, you get a time machine, Back to the Future. We just watched the Michael J. Fox documentary the other night. It's pretty cool. Made me think okay, if you had a DeLorean, you're going to go back to 1920 and you could bring something back. Would you bring back $20 bills or 1 ounce chunks of silver?
Bring back the silver or gold,
Bring back the silver or gold, yes.
because you bring it back. Hey, I got a $20 bill. What's it worth? A pair of socks. Hey, I got an ounce of silver. I can still buy a men's suit.
So gold.
An ounce of gold, I could buy a men's suit. If you could go back to 1940, which would you bring back? You'd bring back 1 ounces of silver.
I would still bring back the silver or gold.
Yeah, if you had a briefcase full of 1 ounce silver coins or gold coins or a briefcase full of $20 bills, you'd definitely bring back the gold.
Right.
Even though in 1920, they're worth the same amount. In today. If you go back to 1950, which would you do? 1960, 1970. If you could go back to an hour ago, which would you bring back? You would always bring back the gold. So if you would never go back in time, whether 5 minutes or 50 years ago, and try to get the paper money, why would you try to accumulate the paper money now?
Because it's falling apart. It's pretty obvious. It's not going to be worth anything.
But people are tricked. People have been brainwashed into thinking, and I get this question all the time too, or this statement. It's like, Kirk, I've heard you on TV a bunch, and I got out of stocks and I got out of bonds, and I'm just sitting with my money in cash in the bank, just sitting on the sideline, right? Because they think that that's safe. Because people have this weird vision of banks, this big marble edifice building and this big vault door, and you open it up and all these stacks of hundreds come flying out. That's not the reality. The reality is, since March of 2020, banks have zero. The Federal Reserve, through Regulation D, said banks don't have to keep anything on hand. So the bank failures that we're seeing now didn't just start. They started in March of 2020 because the Federal Reserve said zero has to be held back. It means when you write checks or you pull money out of your savings account, well, they don't have to have anything there. Right. So it doesn't take too much to have a run on the banks. Okay, this is where it starts to get a little bit creepy. Right? Because what do banks invest in? Banks invest in the same thing that those clients that are telling me I got out and I'm sitting in cash, they invest in the exact same thing. They're investing in stocks, bonds, real estate, mutual funds. They're investing in the same things. But you think that it's sitting in cash. It's not.
You picture pallets of cash at your bank back behind a big door. You walk in there and it's like there's pallets of everybody's money is just sitting there. And if you need some, they'll go back and get it for you.
Correct. So this is the fallacy of banking. It's not as safe as people would think. And so this is why we've got more problems coming, because they didn't fix the problem.
Right.
They actually made the 0% reserve requirement permanent. It's like, Kirk, why would anybody actually do something so stupid as to have 0% reserve requirement? They do that to stimulate the economy. They did that during COVID because if banks don't have to keep even $10 of every $100 you deposit back, they can use it all to invest. Sure. They can lend it out and make more money or do whatever. That's a mechanism to stimulate the economy, but things went south because of Biden's economy and his magnificent economic plan for America, right?
He's trying to stop inflation, man.
Yeah. But low wages are going down, inflation's going up, cost of borrowing is going up, taxes are going up, right? All of that. Yeah. So people are pulling money out of the banks and it's not there. So it's really, really easy to have a run on the banks. So here's a weird thought that I had the other day as I was thinking. It's like back in the early 1900s, the government confiscated gold. And I get this question, Kirk, are they going to confiscate gold again? It's like, no, I don't think that they are. Because only 2% of the population owns gold, only 0.9% owns silver. It's not enough for them to be concerned about. But time and place in history, gold backed the currency back then.
Right.
It was actually the currency. And Roosevelt wanted to actually, after World War I mean, the U.S. economy was bankrupt. They're broke. So it's like, well, we have to issue war bonds. Nobody wanted the war bonds because they had gold. It's like, well, fine. I'm gonna force the issue. We're gonna confiscate people's gold, so you have to invest in war bonds. That's why it went away.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened? The government ran out of money, so they confiscated people's money. See, gold was people's money back then. Today, people don't have gold as money. They have their bank accounts as money. So I was thinking, there's a run on the banks. So if they want to fix the run on the banks, how about you just suspend withdrawals on people's checking accounts? It's the same thing as confiscating gold, because that was currency back then. But now they can stop the run on the banks. But you would have the biggest riots, looting, protesting ever if you cause people to not be able to get to their money in the bank. But I think that's what's coming. I think they will suspend withdrawals from banks to stop bank runs, just like they're doing in France. France, the government ran out of money. And they extended the retirement age. So now people can't retire. And there's riots, looting, protests, in blood in the streets. And so as the government runs out of money here, why not suspend withdrawals from bank accounts to save the banking system? Why not raise the retirement age here? Why not go do other austerity measures and reduce benefits, which is all stuff that's being talked about as we speak.
Well, that's why we're even hearing, like I've heard some people say, hey, they went to their bank to try to get out $10,000 out of their bank. And then the banker asked them a lot of questions. Well, why? What are you taking it out for? Well, you'll need to come back tomorrow. That's already kind of happening a little bit on a small scale. People just even want to take out $10,000 out of their bank account.
Well, they're treating you like a criminal.
Yeah, for your own money.
If you had a couple $1,000s in $100 bills or 20s, and you go deposit it in the bank, they'll say, where'd you get this?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's the legal tender of the land. I've got cash. I mean, it's not like it's criminal act to own cash. It's still the legal tender, but they're treating you like a criminal. Well, if you want cash out, A, they might not have it, but B, they're going to go through the whole, what are you going to use this for?
Yeah, what's for? Yeah.
Why don't you just use your debit card? It's like, I don't want it. I'm going on vacation. I need cash in case my debit card is broken or the machine's broke, whatever. Well, they treat you like a criminal. They have to, because they need to reduce money from the money supply in preparation for a digital currency. You can't have both. It's almost like you can't serve two masters, right? Yeah. So they're getting rid of paper currency because it's private. You can't tax private transactions if people don't report it. So they're trying to get rid of that whole system in exchange for something where everything is completely transparent, everything is known, everything is taxable. That's where we're headed.
Are you having a hard time sleeping at night, thinking, what am I going to do about my finances?
Times are really changing. They're changing fast. Let me give you a quick example of how. In 1920, if you had a $20 bill and 1 ounce of gold, you could go into any men's clothing store and buy an entire suit. You could buy the jacket, the shirt, the belt, shoes, the whole bit. Today, that $20 bill, what's it going to get you?
Not much.
Maybe the socks, maybe a handkerchief, but the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you the entire suit at any men's store in America. That's the difference. That's what inflation does to your dollar. It's a deflating dollar caused by inflation. Now today, that's happening faster than ever. You need somebody that you trust that can help get you out of a fake currency and into something that's going to keep you safe.
And we know a guy that has 2 PhDs by the name of Dr. Kirk Elliott. We have known him for over 25 years, and he's someone we completely trust.
You need somebody that you can get a hold of, somebody that's going to be there for you to get back out of it, and then maybe back into the stock market, maybe back into something else when things settle down. But right now is not that time. You need somebody that you trust and somebody you can call and make those worries go away.
That's exactly right. So you can go to flyovergold.com, fill out your information for your free consultation, or you can call 720-605-3900. Do it today.
You'll be glad you did. So there's a lot of ways to have a store of value. We talk often on the show, like at certain points, I would have suggested for people like, okay, take your cash out of a bank and buy 2x4s. Yeah. That would have been a thing. With the way the wood was going for a while, there was these memes on Facebook of like somebody had a sheet of plywood in the back of their car and there'd be a photo of it. And like, I hate when people just flaunt their wealth.
Yeah.
Like plywood, everything was going up.
Eggs would have been a good one.
We saw a lady on TV yesterday talk about she and her husband own a bakery in New York City, and under Trump, they were paying $31 a case for eggs. I'm not sure how many come in a case. $31 a case for eggs. They went up to as much as $160 under Biden, and now they're at $120 right now, as of this moment. $120 for now. People don't want to pay more for their baked goods, but the eggs are costing more. So all this tension, everybody. There's the idea of a store of value. If you would have bought, take your money out of the bank and bought 2x4s and they doubled in price, it's like, well, that's a store of value. If you have a warehouse full of it, I talked to a guy that was building garages and he had bought this stuff, supplies, 3 years before. So his profit margin was really high. So all of these things are a store of value. What makes silver specifically and even gold unique?
Well, so both of them are tangible assets, meaning they're a thing, right? So what gives something value is it's got scarcity, right? So if you think about it, if you're going out to buy a bicycle, and there's only one bike in town and everybody wants it, it's going to go up in price, because there's tons of demand for it and low supply. If there's 20 people that live in the town and there's 500 bikes for sale, it's like, okay, it's going to lower the price. You just got to get rid of them, right? So what makes something have value is its scarcity, it's hard to get, and it's a thing. See, even Elon Musk, about 4 months ago, somebody asked him, it's like, hey, how do you invest in times of inflation? What do you do? And he said, oh, it's easy. I invest in things. It's the best inflationary hedge that there is, because things always go up with inflation, whether it's cereal or eggs, right? Or gold or silver or gas at the pumps or used car and new car. I mean, things go up with inflation. Companies can go out of business. A stock price can go to zero because it's technically not a thing, right? It's so anything that has scarcity, tangible value, it's something will respond well to inflation.
And so they all act as a store of value. I was speaking to a friend the other day about what makes silver really great is the floor is not only so solid, the floor is so high.
Yes.
And I use it for example, because I happen to have right here, there's 10 ounces of silver in a form, and here's a 1 ounce coin. It costs a little more to make this and to print a design on it and refine it. It could be 10 of these would equal one chunk of this. So, what form you have makes a big difference. We say a store of value. Before we started talking, and I was taking advice from you in this area, the idea of like purchasing gold and silver seemed kind of exotic. Like, what are you like?
Kind of mysterious.
Are you Thurston Howell or something, or Tony Starks or whatever? Like, it seemed like beyond, what an average person would have. Your company and your process makes it so simple and so easy. Now we do it monthly, and so it's been a good thing. But talk about the way you store it and the options, for that, and what kind of shapes and forms these could take.
So a lot of times advisors, at Merrill Lynch, Schwab, UBS, wherever, will say, oh, if you want gold or silver, we can just sell you an ETF.
What does that stand for?
Electronically traded fund, or an exchange traded fund. People use both of them interchangeably. But it's basically like a mutual fund that's tied to the price of gold or silver.
But it doesn't mean extremely terrible fund.
No, I mean it can, because
depending.
Because it's not the thing.
It's actually
a paper proxy for it. So what those ETFs track is the current spot price, which is the current futures month contract price. It's a paper price. That's what's manipulated. That's what JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America are shorting, is that paper price. So when you've got a thing, it's a function of inventory. It's a function of supply and demand. If there's no availability at the depositories, like the big vault, which is where all dealers buy and sell from, or manufacturers like Sony, Samsung, LG, Tesla, go to get their 1,000-ounce bars of silver to melt down to make silver components or circuit boards. If there's no supply, then the price is going to go through the roof because they still need it. So when you're talking about investing in gold or silver, I'm talking about investing in the real thing, not a paper version.
You actually, either you have it or it's in a depository stored somewhere with somebody with a Doberman and a machine gun or whatever.
Because it's not a digit. It's not a certificate. It's this, right? So
because the digit, could you lose? The certificate they could lose? Or how would that work?
Sure. I mean, if there's an EMP blast, for example, and all the power goes out, it's like, do they track it? Do I still have what I thought that I had? I don't know.
Okay.
Right. But when there's selling pressure on the markets, mutual fund managers have to sell, their mutual fund shares, the good along with the bad. So it could go down to not much. Try to take delivery of gold or silver. They're supposedly backing the ETFs. You can't.
Can't do it.
I've never seen anybody that's actually been successful doing it.
Okay.
Technically, they say, oh, yeah, you can take delivery and 400-ounce good delivery bars of gold. I mean, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never known anybody that's actually successfully done it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's just weird. You always get the runaround. It's like, well, why don't you just liquidate it? We'll cut you a check. It's going to take time or whatever. I mean, there's always some excuse, so they just dump it.
Wow.
So when you're buying this stuff, David and Stacy, either you take delivery of it or it's stored at a depository. Somebody's got to take it.
Okay.
Because it's not just going to be.
It's physical.
So
You
what
have to
is
have it.
this? Is 1 ounce of silver here.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's
real.
That's it's not a chocolate coin or something.
No.
1 ounce of silver. What is the floor on this? We were talking one time about the actual process. So somebody had to mine this, and they got trucks, and they got to sift through I don't know how they do it. I'm just making stuff up here, but
Whatever the process
they
is.
sift through the things that are called not silver.
Yeah.
To come up with just silver, and then they got to melt it down and pour it into a shape. So
Correct.
Like there's a cost involved in all that.
Yeah.
What's the actual floor for this 1 ounce?
Okay, so estimates today are over $19 an ounce. So you've got 3 prices.
Mhm.
You've got the spot price, which is the current futures month contract price. But view that in your mind for this example as the price of the metal as it's in the ground. Miners haven't even pulled it out yet.
Okay.
Okay. So then
That's called a spot price.
that's the spot price. That's what you'll see on TV or the internet when it says the price of gold, price of silver. That's the spot price.
okay.
Then the miners go into the earth, they dig their tunnels, they pull it out, they put it on the trucks, drive it to the refinery, chunk it off, melt it down, purify it, make it into a coin or a bar. That's all the manufacturing. At that point, you get wholesale.
Okay.
That's where all dealers are buying and selling from. Like for us, for example, then we charge 8% on top of the wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
You get your final product. When you liquidate, you don't go all the way back to spot price.
Mm-hmm.
There's the depositories take a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
like call it maybe 1%, whatever. So there's a bid and an ask on the wholesale, but you get whatever the bid wholesale price is at the depository, because our firm charges 0 when you liquidate.
That's huge.
Absolutely nothing.
Because it's a gain when you liquidate.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
so you're actually, you paid up front for something that cost you less, and at the end, you don't pay anything when you're selling it for more.
Yeah, so let's say in the industry, the range is maybe 4% to 25% when you purchase, and let's maybe say 6% when you liquidate.
Okay.
So let's say you had $100,000 and you invested it into silver. I'm using that because it's easy math.
Sure.
Right.
Good.
So-
we like easy math.
Yeah. So if 4% when you buy it, that's $4,000. 6% when you liquidate, another $6,000. So that's a total of 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say silver doubles in price and it goes to $200,000. You're still only paying $4,000 when you went in, but it doubled. So, oh man, 6% on $200,000. That's now $12,000.
Yep.
You just paid 16%.
Mm-hmm.
What if it triples? Now you're paying 18% on the back, 4% up front. You just paid 22%.
So why don't you do that? That sounds like a better model for business.
It's not people over profit.
Mm.
See, in our firm, our philosophy and my philosophy as a person is if you focus on people, profit comes. That's just God's way.
Mm-hmm.
If you focus on profit, people will leave
Yeah.
because
that's
that
true.
greed will seep through and people will feel it. They'll experience it. They just don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on people always. And then it's just God's universal law of success. You'll be blessed from it, right? So this is where I wanted to make it simple. I've been doing this for a long time, like 29 years.
Wow.
And I just wanted to have very few moving parts, transparent, easy, accountable to the investor. So 8% when you purchase, 0% when you liquidate. And to me, people don't ask the right questions when they buy.
Mm-hmm.
The exit price is actually more important than the purchase price because you don't invest into something expecting it to stay static in the same price.
Right.
You invest expecting it's going to grow. So any commission on the back end becomes huge
Mm-hmm.
over time.
Yeah.
0 is 0. That 100,000 could grow to 10 million. It's still 0.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's the important part of it. So as you take delivery of it or take it at home, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's a matter of personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got some clients that say, Kirk, I don't trust anybody. Nobody's going to store my stuff for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take it at home, dig a hole in the backyard, put it in the crawl space, put it in a gun safe, whatever. Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got some that say, I hurt my back. I have a bad shoulder. I don't want to take a bunch of silver. It's heavy.
Right.
Or you don't know the neighborhood I live in. It's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to get robbed. I just don't feel comfortable. So I have to have it stored. Great.
Mm-hmm. Either way, it's fine.
Yeah, either way, it's fine.
So you were talking about people don't know the right questions to ask. What are the right questions to ask? If somebody's calling and they want to buy silver, gold, what should they be aware of?
Okay. Not all gold is created equal. Not all silver is created equal. Just because it's metals doesn't mean it's good. Just yesterday, I was talking to a prospective client that called. He went with a competitor, and he wanted to go into bullion because he had heard me. These are bullion.
Explain that.
So bullion is just modern day issue, low cost.
And you get this like in a 10
a 1,000-ounce bar, 100-ounce bar, 10-ounce bar, or 1 ounce silver round like that. What you have is a 1 ounce round.
Is this still considered bullion?
Yeah, it's a bullion, but people think, oh, it's a coin. It's like, well, bullion can be coins. It's not just a U.S. eagle or a Canadian maple leaf. A bullion can be a coin.
Okay.
Right. So, but it's just minted by the refinery instead of a government mint.
Okay.
So this could have a picture of Elvis on it.
Sure. Or a mountain or a cowboy or a butterfly or whatever.
It doesn't matter. It's wherever. It's just minted wherever.
Right.
They did it.
So on that round, it'll say fine silver 0.999.
Okay.
Means it's 99.999% pure silver.
That's pretty
good.
So
it'll say on there the purity and what size it is.
I'm probably not even 99.999% David.
Yeah. So it says the purity on it, and it says how big it is. It says 1 ounce troy.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
So I've never in 29 years, billions of dollars of silver being sold over that time. Tens of thousands of clients all over the world. I've sold a grand total of 0 Canadian maple leafs or U.S. eagles.
Okay, so what are those and what does that mean?
So those are U.S. government mint 1 ounce coins, similar to this round.
Okay.
However, they sell for about a 38 to 40% premium more than this.
Why?
Because it's government mint. Whenever
the government gets their hands on there?
Yeah, they make something more expensive and less
man.
attractive, right?
Okay, so when I go to sell that, is there a market price for like, hey, where do I go to sell coins for 30% more than the value?
Well, they'll just sell it at the depository. Now, you will get more than that, but you're not as much as the premium that you paid for it. So you're going to lose as a percentage. You never recover that premium, which is why I never sell those things.
Right. Okay.
So to me, the lowest cost per ounce, maximize your ounces, minimize your cost is one of the keys to wealth. The other key to wealth, be in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
So bullion, 1,000-ounce bars, 100-ounce bars, 10-ounce bars like this, or 1 ounce rounds are all that you should go into. In the complete silver world, you see a lot of stuff on TV, right? So the questions that you should ask is, I only want bullion. So this gentleman I was talking to yesterday or 2 days ago had called another dealer. He said, I heard this Dr. Kirk guy. I want bullion. They talked him out of it, went into other forms of silver. This guy, it was absolute highway robbery. Realize silver is $24 an ounce at the time we're recording this. It was $24 an ounce when he bought it. He paid $71.15 an ounce for his silver and averaged $3,680 an ounce for his gold.
Oh my gosh.
Highway robbery.
That is
what's the angle from the salesperson to get, because it's probably a smart person, a competent person. He accumulated enough wealth to invest a large sum in silver
and gold.
Or gold. You know, what's the angle for the salesperson to get them to do that? Like if I was selling cars, it'd be hard to sell it for 30-40% more than the blue book.
So he was just lied to. I mean, pretty much he was lied to. It's like, oh, you don't want that bullion. The stuff that we're selling you is dealer non-reportable.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Explain that.
Well, when you purchase it, I don't care if you're buying bullion or anything else, it's dealer non-reportable. Means we don't have to report to anybody that you're buying it. It's a private transaction. But what they were insinuating is when you sell it, it's not reportable. Absolute lie. Try to sell anything, make a profit, not report it to the IRS. You're going to jail.
Yeah.
You're going to have a fine. Something bad is going to happen. You always have to report gains to the IRS when you have a gain. I mean, to me, people say all the time, it's like, Kirk, I don't want to sell this asset because I've got a huge capital gain. I'm going to wait till it comes down. It's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's like,
you say that or think that?
No, I say it. I flat out say it. It's like, what advisor is telling you? It's probably an accountant saying, oh, you don't want to sell right now. The capital gain is too high. It's like, isn't that our goal?
Right.
We want to buy low and sell
money?
high. I don't like to pay taxes like anybody else.
Sure.
Nobody does. However, the fact that you have a large capital gain means you have a large gain.
Right.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
So it's not like the capital gains tax is 100%. It's like
Right.
26 or something, like whatever it is, right? So you're still capitalizing on the 74%. The fact that there's a gain means that's when you want to sell. And then the key is to always be in the right place at the right time. So this guy was probably told, well, it's dealer unreportable, insinuating that they don't have to pay taxes on it when they sell it. Lie. You always have to. B, it's like, I think that he was told that those are going to appreciate more because they're somewhat rare. That was the case back in like the 90s. Okay. You know, if you had a rare coin, there wasn't any other games in town. So if somebody wanted leverage or double play on their investment, go into gold or silver, go into a rare coin. When silver and gold heat up, the premiums will double, triple, quadruple because you just can't get them and people will want them. People today, if they want privacy and leverage, they don't go to rare coins. They go to cryptocurrency. Game changer forever. So those rare coins and things like that, I don't think will ever act like they used to in the past. Okay. Which is why you just go into low-cost bullion. And this poor guy, I mean, in $1 million investment, probably lost $380,000 overnight. Man. So don't ever fall for that trick. Right. Just go into bullion, low-cost bullion. Or because
you're buying ounces.
All you want to do is buy it. Don't ever buy a story.
No. Like this we're on a Caribbean shipwreck. Right. George Washington used to own this coin, whatever, you know, then just you hear all your stories like this. People come up to you and they bought these collectibles and it probably is valuable. It's like a baseball card. You know, I mean, if I had a Babe Ruth card or something like that, it's probably worth quite a bit. Now we have an EMP go off and I'm trying to get food. I don't know what I'm going to get for it.
Right.
You know, because it's like, well, how many Babe Ruth enthusiasts are there in the middle of a you know, nuclear fallout or something? Like probably not a lot.
Well, and to liquidate those things, you have to make a market for them. Yeah. So the reason I like bullion, it's exchange traded. Call the depository. Hey, lock it in. What's the price? 45 seconds. Boom, locked in. We wire you the funds because it's a globally traded commodity. Even if it's not in demand here, it's going to be demand in China, India, someplace else where their currency is strong. There's always a market, and it's 45 second. Plus, silver is used in manufacturing. Sony, Samsung, LG, they're buying it all the time, right? So if you
never really stuck with it.
No, if you have a storied coin, we've all seen the movies of like the boiler rooms, right? Where 1,000 people in there and they call you up, hey, client, I've got a good deal for you today. We've got this excess inventory and I'll give you 10% off today if you buy it right now. But you got to buy it now because it's probably going to be gone tomorrow. We've all heard the horrible sales stuff. That's what you have to do in those rare coins or those semi-rare coins because there's not a ready-made market for them. Somebody needs to sell them. So in the end game, there might not be liquid. Liquidity is key to profitability because you have to sell it when you want to. Right. And that's why I love the bullion.
Okay, so the questions were first like bullion, making sure like what percentage is taken up front versus at the tail end. What other kind of questions should people be aware of or know when they're buying silver?
So I mean, look at the commissions, look at the amounts that you're paying, but look at the advice you're getting. Right? Some people they call me and say, well, Kirk, you charge 8%. I found this other place that I can get it for 4% online. Great. Well, when are you going to sell it? Well, I don't know. I mean, you're just a transaction. You're a number. You're on your own. So if you think that you're good enough where you can find a time to liquidate
you gotta sell it
without any kind of advice. And then some people have said, well, I watch your shows. I'm just going to listen to you and buy cheaper elsewhere. It's like, well, then you're going to have to deal with that on your own. I mean, because people will do that. They'll get advice from someplace else and think that they can do it. But there's more to it than that. Like, it's not that I like silver all the time. Sometimes I like gold. Sometimes I like stocks and bonds, right? Right now we happen to be in silver because of the ratio of how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. Yeah. So we can get into that if you'd like. I mean,
a little bit. Let's talk about the why silver now, not gold, the difference between the two, the divide into each other. So we've talked about that. I heard you say on another show, ask about other kinds of metals that you could buy. Like, you know, it's not just silver. You can buy, you know, copper. You can buy, you know, about anything. Like why silver right now? What makes it the thing?
So there's numerous metals that you can buy. Copper, Sure, but copper's cheap. I mean, literally, you'd have to have like a whole garage full of copper to equal a handful of gold.
Okay.
I mean, it's insane, right? So you don't want that.
Right.
Okay.
Platinum, palladium, two other precious metals you could go into. I don't like them because they're heavily controlled by South Africa and Russia. Like 95% of the markets come from those.
Oh, wow.
So with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there's export controls. Premiums have shot through the roof. Whenever that conflict ends, if it ends, premiums come crashing down. The investor never recovers from buying them at a high premium time. Time and place for everything doesn't necessarily make them inherently bad, just makes them bad for right now.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Right? So you can buy rhodium too, but I don't know what industrial demand, maybe telescopes or lasers or something use rhodium. I have no idea. But the meat and potatoes is gold and silver. That's all I would focus on. High volume traded, lowest margin because of the volume. You get the most bang for your buck with those two.
So, and a lot of times I know that we talk about silver versus gold at this point, and then maybe later on moving to gold. Why is that?
So there's a ratio between the two. And that historical ratio is about 20-1, meaning it takes 20 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold.
Okay.
So if you were to take the price of silver, let's just call it $25. It's a little less than that, but for easy math, 25 times 20, that would put gold at $500 an ounce. It's like gold's not $500 an ounce. It's like 2,000.
Yeah.
Right. So today the ratio is 83-1. Multiply 83 times the price of silver, it gets you the price of gold.
Okay.
So what that number gives us is one of two things. Gold is overvalued or silver is undervalued. We don't know until we ask another set of questions, which is what causes gold and silver to go up or down. Okay. Unsustainable debt, inflationary pressures, political chaos, geopolitical conflict.
You just described the world.
We've got all check boxes in all four of those, which means gold is going to continue to go up.
Okay.
So gold's not overvalued. Gold's going to continue to go up. So that means the alternative now is true is silver has to outpace it because it just will. Because as silver grows faster than gold and gold's still going up, what does that do? That ratio comes down from 70-1 to 60-1 to 50-1 to 40-1, right? It's going to approach that 20-1. So at 40-1-ish, we're half of where we are today. So if I wanted to, I could sell your silver, roll it into gold, and what did I just do? If I got you twice as many ounces of gold then as what I could have purchased for you today. So go back down to 20-1. It's like, oh, I do it again. Double your ounces, right? So back in 2011, we were at 30-1.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean.
And it's 83-1 now.
And it's 83-1.
Wow.
So this ratio goes back and forth. Now, if we were at 30-1 or 20-1, I wouldn't be in silver at all. I'd be 100% into gold. And then the ratio is going to be moving in the other direction, and we can compound going back into silver. So some of my clients never want to go back into the stock market ever again. Right. They don't trust it. They think it's manipulated. They want something that's real.
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter what asset we're in here, gold or silver. We can continually compound your ounces over time by playing this ratio. I've been doing this since 2002 with clients' portfolios. And so it's really an amazing way to not just grow as the price of gold or silver go up, but we can compound your ounces, grow them, and increase your wealth.
Okay, because based on the season of what's going on. So let's say you have a really nice Corvette. Well, something goes crazy in the world, and it's that. How many people can you put in it? What can you pull with it? What can you do? Well, probably F-250 would be a better move if you got to pull a trailer, grab some people, do some things. It's like it's not that a Corvette's bad. It's just, hey, in this season, it's not very functional and useful. And it's probably that way with a lot of different kind of investments, as well. What would happen in the world if the silver supply was shut off? Like, how useful is silver in the marketplace? If there was no silver tomorrow, you ever heard the Einstein thing, like the world will be gone in a month if there's no bees, or something like that. I don't know how it goes or how long, but bees are important, right? Ask Dr. Janet Schmidt.
Yes.
But what if there was no silver?
That would be devastating to the economy.
Like, what would it look like? Imaginary world.
Well, all electronics use silver in their circuitry. So they're circuit boards.
Okay. So as long as we have electronics,
there's a need for silver.
I don't see that trend going away.
I don't either. So let's say that silver supply at the COMEX depositories, which is the storehouse for all the silver. That's where dealers and manufacturers buy it from. Let's say it goes to zero. There is nothing left for delivery, which, according to Andy Schechtman, another researcher in the industry, we will get to that point in about 5 months.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that before.
Yeah, so silver is diminishing because of too high demand, low supply. So if that happens,
Stacey and I are buying it all.
Yeah, yes.
I wish.
If that happens, Sony, Samsung, LG, Tesla, they're not going out of business.
Right, no.
They'll just offer whatever price they need to get it because it's a small portion of their final product, right? If you're making an LCD TV and you have these circuit boards in there, it's like, okay, it's not like 100% of the price of the TV. It's a small price. So they would say, okay, we're going to offer $40 an ounce, $80 an ounce, $120 an ounce. Whatever it takes up, higher prices always shake out inventory from the people that own.
Yep.
And this is where you start. So an elimination of silver would mean prices go through the roof because it's still needed for manufacturing.
So what would happen to iPhones?
They do probably the same thing, right?
They would would they be like a $3,000 iPhone or something? If just keep going up.
Well, if you can't get silver quick enough, there's going to be a limited supply of iPhones, and so the price goes through the ceiling. As these manufacturers pay higher prices for the component parts of their things, well then the price is going to go up as a percentage of however much silver is in each phone, right?
Okay.
They will go through the roof.
So speaking of Ford pickups, like there's a parking lot not far from where we live. I say at a parking lot, it's not part of a business or a store. It's just chain link fence all around it. As far as you can see, F-150 pickups. Mm-hmm. I mean, almost as far as you can see, more than you could possibly count. Mm-hmm. It would look like an NFL game day as far as like just F-150s. Mm-hmm. And I was like baffled, like, will they store them there? What's the deal? Well, they just don't have computer chips.
Yeah.
They're painted. They got seats. They got windows. They have everything except for a computer chip. So like a disruption in silver could cause that kind of thing in lots of areas. All of a sudden you got this clog of like, we have all these trucks sitting out in the weather. They're outdoors and everything else and just not able to put a computer chip in it. Like we could end up with that space pretty quick. We're only talking a few months of backlog supply. Mm-hmm. You got the guys from the Hobbit movie down there, I'm sure with pickaxes digging away, trying to get silver as fast as they can and singing their songs and grooming their beards and whatever. I don't know where silver comes from. I kind of picture it like the Hobbit.
Well, it's it comes from the earth. Yeah.
They're down there, and singing. So there's only so much. So they can only get it up fast enough. And we know there's a floor of around $18 or $19 because that's what it takes for them to dig it out with the little pickaxes and put it on a truck and then melt it down and turn it into a thing.
Right.
So you have not only a fairly high floor, it'll never be blockbuster stock. I think there's an episode of like Parks and Rec or one of them where it's like somebody inherited like $1 million worth of stock or something, but it isn't blockbuster, so it's like nothing. It's worth zero. So it'll never be blockbuster stock. And not only does it have a solid floor because we need it, we're always going to need it for stuff. It's a pretty high floor. It's not too far from the price it's selling for now.
It's not. It might be 20% less, but see, that's a minimizing risk, maximizing your return kind of moment, which is what every investor wants. A stock could go to zero. FTX could go to zero. Yep. BlockFi could go to zero. Enron went to zero. Bed Bath & Beyond just went out of business, right? Companies can go out of business overnight. So can banks. Things never go to zero. When was the last time eggs were free? When was the last time a used car, new car was free?
Nope.
Well, never. How about going to the gas station? Have you ever had free gas?
No.
No. Things don't ever go to zero, which a traditional advisor will say, Stacey, you don't want to invest in gold or silver. It's way too risky. Like, I mean, they say that kind of garbage.
Wow.
It's like,
in what way?
Well, because they say it's way too volatile. It's way too risky. The reason they say that is because they don't sell it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the reason why, because there's a rule in the industry selling away where if somebody that's a securities dealer recommends something that they don't sell, they could lose their job. Self-preservation comes into play. It's like, even if I think that gold and silver are amazing, we don't sell it as a firm. So I can't lose my job. Yeah. I got to feed my family. So I'm just not going to recommend it.
Well, you're not going to be like at a Tesla sales shop and they got pictures of little kids, making your batteries in the dirt in some foreign country. It's like, Tesla kind of wants to keep where their batteries come from, like outside the sales room.
I mean, this happened to me back in 2001.
Okay.
I was stock and bond guy back then, just like, other dealers. And the company that I was working for, I was recommending to some of my clients that they put a portion of their portfolio into gold at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't making any money on it. We just didn't offer it. Well, they gave me a cease and desist letter. They said, you can't do that. You're selling away. It's like, I'm not selling anything. That means I'd be making money off it.
Right.
I'm just telling clients to do the right thing.
Yeah.
With a portion of their assets on something that
People
we
over
don't
profit.
offer.
Yep.
It's people over profit. So they said, it's like, all right, God's my provider, not you. I'm quitting.
Yeah.
So then I had to go tell Joe. It's like, hey,
sorry, Joe.
Guess what I did?
And no more cheeseburgers for
For
a while.
I quit. But I'll always do that. I did that a second time in my career when the metals dealer I was working for was wanting to sell those history type coins.
Okay.
High premium stuff. It's like, it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
So just quit.
Right.
I always will do what's right for the client. But here's where, for me individually, I can't put my own judgments on other people. I'll always do what's right for the client, but I have to honor the company I'm working for at the same time. If those two don't coexist, I can't stay.
Then you can't stay.
That's why it's usually best if you can work for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why you find people like, Dr. Mark Sherwood and Michelle, like, there's a movie about her life called The Prayer
List?
The Prayer List. It's a phenomenal movie. But she's working in, what I call like the factory hospital, big building. And there's this, like, you can't see a client more than 10 minutes. You need your iPad touched, you're in and out. It's like a ratio. And she's like, I didn't get in here to crank through. I got in here to help people get well and help people go from good to great. Like, and so before it was really cool, went into our own practice and say, we're focused. I could prescribe you anything in the whole world. She was the valedictorian of her medical school, but she's like, I'm also going to talk to you about your diet.
Right.
And I'm going to talk about your water intake. How much sleep are you getting? Yeah, The Prayer List.
Great movie.
It's a phenomenal movie. It's one of the most inspiring movies you ever want to watch. But people get to that place. But again, also financially, it's a risky place to be. You're like, hey, but at the end of the day, it seems like the people that do that usually thrive. Right. The Sherwoods, unbelievable.
People over profit.
But it's scary to do.
It's good seeds that are sown.
Yeah.
So what I just really hit me when you were talking about, so somebody calls and they say, hey, I can get this for 4%, but they have to sell it. I mean, so then they're going to go sell it. They're going to have to find somebody that's going to have to help them sell it. And then they're going to pay more percentage to them for selling it. So
put a table in front of your house and a little sign.
I mean, so how are you going to sell it? So, okay, so let's say that we're working with you. We pay that 8% up front. There's no back end. So then, silver's thriving and we're going to move to gold. You actually walk us through that process. It's a relationship that we now have with you, and you help us through every step of it. And then maybe it's going into stocks and bonds afterwards. I mean,
absolutely.
Whatever's recommended.
Whatever minimizes your risk and maximizes your return. Different times in history, those are different things.
Yeah.
Right now, it happens to be silver. During the Trump years, it happened to be stocks. During the Reagan years, it was stocks. See, during the Reagan years from 1983 to 2002, so like 20 years, gold went from $250 an ounce to $258.
Oh,
went up
really?
$8 in 20 years. It stunk. And so I'm not saying that gold and silver are the greatest thing forever.
Right.
There's a time and place for
But
everything.
even then, it never became blockbuster stock.
Yeah, but why did it stink?
But it didn't go up.
Because the stock market was booming. They lowered interest rates. They created jobs. They lowered taxes. The Cold War was over. The Berlin Wall came down. Newt Gingrich had the contract with America. Democrats and Republicans were talking and making deals. It was a great time. So therefore, no need for an alternative investment class. You look at today, everything that I just described is opposite.
Yep.
So therefore, opposite policies will have an opposite outcome. Today, the safest investment happens to be silver.
And I'm just so thankful that we found you. I know the Flyover family is too. We get so many people that come up to us at events and they're like, "Oh, I'm so glad you connected me to Dr.
Without exception.
I mean, it's over and over. Well, at the meet and greet, when we were in the meet and greet in Miami, I mean, you were there and people were like, "Oh, Doctor's here," They came up and they're like, "Oh, thank you so much. I see Doctor. I'm going to go talk to him," It's just really exciting to see how you're helping so many people in this process. I mean, it has to feel good to you and your team as well.
Well, it feels good to know that when you're shouting it from the rooftops, putting your reputation on the line every single week like you all are, that people are listening.
Yeah.
And we're helping. I love to hear that we're helping people and it's taking away that anxiety and that stress. and melting it off, and they're getting to a point of peace.
Yep.
That feels so good.
Yeah.
to me.
It does. There's some pictures from our meet and greet. It was just
Let's have a
so cool.
great time at these
Yeah.
events. You know, and everybody, it's our family. You know, some of our best friends have all bought silver from you. You know, my mother-in-law has a great experience with you. You know, and I don't want her mad at me. I've stewarded this thing for 30 years. They say behind every great man is a great woman and a surprise mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law and I are tight.
Yeah.
I mean, we get along great. I don't want to mess that up.
Exactly.
You know, she thinks you hung the moon. So.
She does. She does. So as you were talking about Reagan years, you were talking about Trump years, you're talking about obviously what's going on now. How do nations die? I mean, we're seeing kind of what's happening here in the United States. How has that happened in the past? Because we're not the only ones that have struggled. You know, how does that happen?
So nations can die from external forces. Military comes in, destroys them, right? But I wrote an article and done some videos on basically paralleling the United States with the Roman Republic. So very fascinating because the Roman Republic was huge. They had expanded all over the world, right?
They were doing well.
Strong, big, huge, massive military, political clout. I mean, everything, right? But they eroded from within. They had lost their character. They had lost their ethics as a nation. And they started to erode from within. In fact, the Roman Republic around 2,000 plus years ago, you know, during the time of Christ time frame, there was a guy who was running for tribunal, which is like a governor in the Roman Empire. His name was Claudius, and most influential politician of all time that nobody's ever heard of.
Okay.
I mean, really, hardly anybody's ever heard of this guy. It's like, well, what did he do? Yeah, what did he do that was so influential? Well, he decided, I really want this job. Really want to be this tribunal office. So I'm going to offer people free grain in exchange for votes.
Ah, heck of a deal.
I mean, seriously, they're still doing that today, whether it's free cell phone, free medical care, free things. I mean, using other people's money. And still to this day, politicians are mimicking what Claudius did to get elected. So
even Pedro, vote for me. All your hopes and dreams will come true.
Yes, even Pedro.
Even Pedro.
Even Pedro. Sadly, we've got a lot of Pedros in office.
Yeah,
today.
most of them.
True.
Yeah. So what happened is, when Rome collapsed after years and years and years of this, 1/3 of the population of Rome was on government assistance. 1/3. Well, how much of America is getting Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, women, infant, children programs? I mean, literally, how much do you think it is? 50%?
I would say
60?
at least 50, maybe 60.
Yeah, we're pushing 90%.
Oh my God.
And all you have to do to look at that is go to whitehouse.gov, look at the federal budget, and look at the amount of revenue that comes in is $4.8 trillion. Look at the amount of expenses, it's $6.8 trillion. So $2 trillion more than what we bring in. But of that $6.8 trillion, we're talking over $4 trillion of it is food stamps, women, infant, children, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, right? It's about close to 90% of everything that we bring in is going towards that. So there's no way that they're going, if they don't raise the debt ceiling, right? If they want to cut the budget, they're going to cut from 90% of the people that are getting those expenses. That's what they cut from. Politicians don't want to do that. So when Rome fell, with 1/3 of the population living as, books have described it as parasites on the bureaucracy, just taking. Opposite of what God calls us to do is be givers, right? So, and there's nothing wrong with giving to people. There's nothing wrong with helping people, giving them a handout, a helping hand when time in need.
Absolutely.
That's what Christians are supposed to do. That's what churches are supposed to do. But I was talking to George Barna. This was about a decade ago, Christian pollster, and I asked the question. It's like, how much do people actually tithe? I said, well, I don't know
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of the church actually tithes, but I did actually do a study on how many of the church give. That could be $5 in the offering bucket at Easter.
Okay.
Not tithing, just actually giving a small amount. What could be anything.
Give at all.
About 10%.
Oh.
Really?
10% of evangelicals and Catholics actually give.
Oh.
Give.
Man.
So this is the problem. This is what we are called to do. So there's this massive void
Where do
that's
some
been,
of them struggle?
yeah, there's this big void that's been created when the church isn't doing what the church is supposed to do. The government stepped in.
Mm-hmm.
So they just filled a need because we aren't doing what we're supposed to do.
Yep.
So now we've got this out of control because believers didn't do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
So where are we at now?
And we're blaming the government. It's like, well, they just stepped in.
Right.
But their problem is they're using other people's money to do it.
Yeah.
So where are we at as a country right now, percentage-wise?
Close to 90%.
I'm going to cheat here just a little bit because I have a really good resource called Thriving in the Economic Tsunami.
Right.
But you list in your book here, states let's see, how'd you exactly phrase it? Welfare payments bringing citizens more money than they would have made working a full-time job. Minimum wage job leaving residents, little reason to take entry-level employment. Hawaii, for example, which is a sweet place to live.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
$60,590 a year.
Colton's so good he already has it up there.
You can make by not working. Washington D.C. 50,820. Massachusetts 50,400. Connecticut 44,370. New York 44,000. These are all. I do notice that these are all strong blue states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is the common denominator. You got New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont, home of Bernie Sanders and Great Syrup, $42,000. California is $37,000. When I get down to Missouri, which is red from top to bottom, it is $22,800. It's third from the bottom of this.
Proud to be from Missouri.
Yeah,
That's good.
On that list. But when you look at that, why would people want to be productive, which is an integral part of your self-esteem?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's critical. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody or women. I don't know what it's like to be inside one or to be one. But as a man, you want to be productive. You want to produce. You want to be necessary. You want to be relevant. You want to, like, at the end of the day, you know what? I did something. We want to be able to provide for your family, even if you're just contributing. So forget about the decay from the inside of, like, you know what? I'm just paid to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a human paperweight, basically, for this couch. How can you have enough people that are producing that they have enough abundance to pay for the ones that aren't? How does that ever work out?
At some point, it just doesn't. I mean, you look at that list and you're talking about Missouri at $22,000. It's still more than what you would make in minimum wage in Missouri. Yeah. I mean, everybody that's on that list, you make more on handouts than you would with a minimum wage job. Not every state is on there, but the ones that are, that's where you make more. So imagine making almost $61,000 a year in Hawaii, sitting on the beach drinking a Mai Tai every single day, or whatever they would want to do. If you go even get a part-time job, you start losing that. So why? Why would you? I mean, for me, it's unfathomable. I have to create. I have to work. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of society that said I can just do nothing and keep making. This is where welfare has gotten out of control. Mm-hmm. It should be a Band-Aid. It should be I know that you just lost your job. Let's get you some unemployment here for a bit. Hopefully get back on your feet.
There's a strong push right now by the Republicans. And again, if people watch our show, I beat up on Republicans about the same amount as I beat up pastors, which is a lot, because I figure those are our tribe and I expect a lot from those guys. But on a good side, they are pushing for, if you are out of work for a period of time and you're receiving a benefit, then you should be in a program to gain a skill or volunteering within an organizational structure somewhere. 20 hours a week was the pitch.
Right. And
it was shot down hard, fast, and cold by the Democrats. Didn't even make it out of their mouth hardly. But again, I kind of go back to the value inside. If you're receiving something and you're like, man, I am in a bad spot. I took a step back. I was in this field and now, you know what? They don't even need me anymore. Whatever, the world changed. If you're learning a new skill, you're learning how to do something else. Like there's now hope, in your life. Seems like that would be like a gift that you can't even see or touch in our culture of people having value, their self-esteem, of their like, man, you know what? Because everybody needs some version of this. I believe next year is going to be better than this year, and I'm doing something now to make it so.
Yeah.
Some version of that. You need that, which is opposite of the news. The news is saying next year is going to be worse than this year, and there's nothing you can do about it. So just take drugs and play video games.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Yuval Harari kind of angle. Like the idea of keeping people productive in that process would seem fundamentally necessary to an ongoing thriving culture.
Well, I wouldn't listen to anything Harari says. I mean, he thinks we're a bunch of useless eaters.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that's their view of people.
I'm like, I'm not useless.
I am an eater.
You're only half right.
You can tell I'm an eater, but I'm not useless, right?
Exactly.
So don't call me useless.
So everything that we're talking about is a progression towards more and more globalist control of our lives, right? There's this push towards universal basic income. That's going to make the welfare state even bigger. I was talking to Rudy Giuliani a couple days ago. In Manhattan, they just passed a bill for $1,000 a month for single moms in Manhattan. Just
giving them $1,000.
Just giving it to them.
If you're single.
There's really no way to. They're not making them verify that they're a single mom. I mean, it's just okay. You go and say, "Yeah, I'm a single mom. Here's $1,000, right? A month."
Wow.
Where is the state going to get that from?
Yeah.
I mean, if the federal government, I know where the federal government gets it, they'll just go to the printing press. States don't have a printing press. States have to raise taxes to generate money. So you think New York is a high tax state now? Oof.
Ooh.
What about California and the reparations bill and wanting to pay people from the black community over $1 million because of things that happened in the past, right? It's like, where is that going to, where is this close to $1 trillion going to come from? There's going to be a mass exodus out of California. Now you're going to have fewer people in California to pay taxes because they're not going to want to be taxed so there's no tomorrow.
Right.
See, this is the end of society as we know it.
Is
right?
that how a society dies?
That's how society dies. It starts with an absence of character, an absence of ethics, causes people to start making bad decisions, wanting to be a victim mentality. It's like, you owe me, right? This is what the people in Rome wanted. They said, you owe us, and what we owe you is a vote in exchange for this. That's how it started. But it gets worse and it gets worse and it progresses until now you don't even recognize society. We don't recognize the country that the founding fathers started.
I'm sad.
Yeah, it's insane. But with the federal government, they have a printing press to pay for all of this stuff. Now we're paying the piper for excessive debt because it's easy to give something. It's really hard to take it away once you've politically made it happen.
Sure, then people expect it.
Correct.
It's just part of everything that they do.
Correct.
So you got Rome. Did the same thing happen in Venezuela, Zimbabwe? I mean, is it pretty much the similar?
Dr. Melissa Tate, I mean, she grew up. Zimbabwe was a thriving country.
They called it the breadbasket.
The breadbasket of Africa. They had huge aircrafts taking off every morning all over Europe from Zimbabwe, full of flowers.
Right.
Like supply
flying them everywhere.
Flowers, bread, grain, things all over the world. And within, one person got elected, devalued their currency, and literally
it wasn't very long.
Within
like a 90-day window, it's a ludicrous number. It was like a 1,000,000% or something inflated. It was like ludicrous.
Oh, it's insane.
Like literally a shopping. Her mother's retirement fund, which was the equivalent of like she had like about $150,000 in this IRA, would buy you a cart of groceries like that quick. The exchange rate was the equivalent of what in our money would be about $150,000. You could buy groceries with it, one cart. And she said, while you're in the store, they didn't put any prices because it was changing so fast.
Right. The same thing happened in Weimar Republic, Germany after World War I. Germany won the war, right? They bombed the living daylights out of the world. Treaty of Versailles came in, said, hey, Germany, you got to repay the war debts. It's like, what? And so they couldn't afford it. So they abandoned the gold standard, printed money like there was no tomorrow. That caused hyperinflation so big that people had to be paid in wheelbarrows full of cash twice a day because a loaf of bread would double from lunch to dinner time. So it can happen anywhere, and it always happens from bad policy. Like the two examples that we just talked about, take the politics out of it. You can either agree or disagree with paying single moms in New York $1,000. You can either agree or disagree with the reparations bill in California. Immaterial. Doesn't matter. The point is economically is where does this money come from?
Right.
They're either going to tax the living daylights out of people, or because sometimes you pay for good things. You might say, I love these ideas. Great, but it's still going to cost money that states or governments don't have. So when you start to see that, whether the outcome is good or bad, if it's money that you don't have and you have to print it or tax it, it's going to impact the economy in a negative way. Everything costs something. And we're at the point where our society is collapsing because of the weight of the entitlement system.
It's changed so much so fast in our lifetime. I remember Stacy making this comment, I don't know, years ago. We were probably 25. She's like, if somebody made $100,000 a year, now granted, we probably never made 25 in our lifetime at this point. If somebody made $100,000 a year, like you could probably buy an island or something.
I thought maybe, you could buy St. Thomas or something, or St. John.
Like one of the little ones around it or something.
Yeah, something.
It was just an astronomical amount of money. And you had referenced like the term was somebody was a six-figure earner.
Right.
And that was like an elite.
That was a big deal.
That was an elite thing. You were probably the president of a bank or something, or you owned
it was a big deal.
You owned the car dealership, or there weren't very many people that maybe a household might make that, but not an individual earning $100,000 a year. And I mean, boy, has that shifted, now, to where like, what can you get with $100,000? Well, some of these states, I don't know how you would live in New York on less than $100,000 a year. Like you see the show Friends of like, I don't know how you have a 3-bedroom apartment and you're a waiter, in New York City. I don't care if they have rent control or not. It's like you couldn't live in San Francisco. You couldn't live in LA, and unless you're just renting a closet from somebody, without the places where the policies you're talking about have had a chance to really gain foothold. $100,000 a year is just going to help you just live indoors.
Yeah.
I mean, which sounds crazy. And part of it is that, minimum wage, they got that going to $20 an hour in some places. And it's just, ludicrous. We could make minimum wage $300 an hour. It's irrelevant because then, okay, great.
And how much are your hamburgers costing?
Yeah.
And,
you're gonna pay $50 for a cheeseburger, at McDonald's drive-thru. So it all kind of, we've seen it though. This isn't over a long period of time. We would talk to our grandparents or somebody and it's like, hey, gas used to be a dime, I used to make 25 cents an hour. Like,
well, you just said you got a hamburger for 25 cents.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's like, are you kidding me?
But instead of taking decades and decades for the shift, we're seeing it now within just a few years of it, like the whole deck being shuffled and how much things cost. Speaking of F-150s, a diesel F-250, a new one next year, a 2024, they're already listing them over $110,000.
I mean, it's insane.
For a truck, a pickup truck.
I don't know how people can afford this. Jolene and Caden and I went to LA for some meeting, and we were just driving around Beverly Hills, and we saw this apartment building, and it was a dive. I mean, literally a dive. And it said 1-bedroom apartments starting at $4,500 a month. It's like,
I mean, what?
I mean, and it was a dump.
I
wouldn't want to live in it.
Yeah.
And it was $4,500 a month.
Wow.
I mean, it is so unsustainable. I don't know how people in those states can afford to live either. I mean, you go to Missouri where we are now. It's like, $4,500 a month for rent. You're going to get the Taj Mahal.
Right.
You got a pool. You got a dock. You got a lake with a dock or something. I don't know. Your dog has a nice house in the back.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at inflation. We're looking at all of these things. So protecting yourself against inflation, you're going to do that through metals, through something tangible.
Yes.
Silver, gold. How about protecting an IRA?
Same thing. If metals can protect you outside of an IRA, metals can protect you inside of an IRA, right? So, but the key is we're not talking about ETFs, mining shares, mutual funds, anything like that. We're talking about physical metals. So the same gold or silver that you would store outside of an IRA, you can store inside of an IRA.
Okay.
So it's just it's a tax-free rollover from IRA to IRA, but allocate into something that's solid.
Okay.
Right. So outside of an IRA, though, like in the gold world, you can do some of those rare historied, storied coins, the semi-numismatic rare garbage. Don't ever do that. You can't do that kind of stuff inside of an IRA.
Okay.
David, nor can you do like that piece of garbage that you have on
Yeah.
I did bring this up. I didn't really show the world here, but this is something somebody gave me. It says Second Amendment on it. It's made out of metal of some kind. It's not chocolate, but it is.
Nor is it gold.
Nor is it gold.
Right.
Nor
Exactly.
would you probably want to touch it now.
Because you just bit it.
Because it's been in my mouth. But, but you see these things around a lot.
Well, you see those things around everywhere. It's like a replica.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen commercials for it. Get this amazing Trump coin for $29.95, 3 equal payments. So and it says pure gold. It's like, wait a second, it's not pure gold.
Right.
Well, it's pure. It's
right?
pure gold plated of some sort, right? So listen to the words, but anything, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. I mean, I tell clients this all the time. $120, you're not getting 1 ounce of gold, and gold is $2,000 an ounce.
No.
Even if this were gold all the way through, 24 karat or 20 karat, right? It's like 90% gold. All right. It's probably going to sell for something much greater than bullion prices because it's got some kind of a story to it.
Right. Yep.
The only time a story is important to anybody is the first person who buys it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
You're the first person.
True.
Everybody else, it's like, oh, I don't care if that was sentimental to you.
Yeah.
I just want it for the gold content.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why people never really make out of it. Now, if you're a collector, go ahead and buy some of that stuff. I don't want to say that it's garbage when somebody's collecting it and they want a collection and they never plan on selling it. But I'm not a collector. I'm an investor.
Right.
I bought a bunch of coins. We're in Israel recently. I probably bought 30 coins or something like that. And they're, little widow's mites or this and that. They're all kinds of different currencies from different, the coin itself has probably no value because the culture that was backing it is now gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like a neat thing to me. It's kind of cool. I got a story. I have no intention of like, I'm going to go on eBay and sell this for something. It's like, hey, here's some coins. This is a thing from this country. This is a thing from here. They all kind of got a little story to them, but they're only interestingly valuable.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It tells a story. It tells the story of your trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because the little widow's mite, it looks kind of cool. It's got some kind of a worn off engraving on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not totally round and it's like a piece of copper. And it's like,
Yep.
cool little story. And now you can tell a story about your trip. But that's all it's really good for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at a lot of those things like that. Now, if you probably go back to that little widow and she got like the $20 that I got for her and converted that her thing she made, she might have done pretty good.
Yeah.
But again, that's time.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And time is sort of what is this magical, invisible force that can create wealth or not. It's what makes a cup of coffee become a $2 million asset. Or just, I was highly caffeinated for the last 40 years, or it is it works. That's what makes, if you were to go back to 1920 and have a shoebox full of $20 bills or a shoebox full of one ounce coins of gold, it's like that time from now to then is what makes that gold so valuable.
Right.
That we can really harness and leverage to our advantage, and beat inflation. But if not, inflation is like this monster that never sleeps that is eating up. It's like, what's the verse about? You talked about earlier in Malachi about the locusts coming and eating and destroying. It's like it's like that. It decays things at the bones of our society itself.
It is. It's the biggest hidden tax on Americans or anybody around the globe ever. The government might be magic in the sense of they can take a perfectly valuable piece of paper, put some ink on it, and make it worth nothing.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's wild. But yet they do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, as wise and prudent investors, we need to start shifting our normalcy bias of what we thought in the past. So stocks have always been good in the past, therefore they're going to be good in the present and in the future. Buy and hold for the long term, and it'll always go up. Is that a true statement? Kinda. The stocks are higher than they were in 2009. They're higher than they were in 2000 after those corrections.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a better way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why would you ride something up and ride it back down and then ride it up and ride it back down when you can identify those intermediate trends, sell at the intermediate high, get out of it and go into something that's lower, ride it up, sell it, and then just keep doing that. Maximize your growth. Be the wise steward that God created us to be. Even people who just sit in the cash on the sideline and cash. It's like, I don't want to lose everything I've worked so hard. I want God to be happy with me. It's like, oh, well, Jesus told a story about this.
He did.
It's like, he had the 3 servants and the one did really good. Then there was like the middle one. And then the one who was afraid buried his talents in the sand because he didn't want to lose what God had given him. It's like, but what did Jesus call him in this parable?
Wicked.
Yeah, he didn't call him the dumb servant.
Mm-mm.
He called him the wicked servant. That's worse than dumb.
Yep.
Right? It's like I don't want to be the wicked one.
Exactly.
We have to be a wise steward with any of our talents,
Mm-hmm.
with our voice, with our brain, with our giving, with our heart, with our love, with our finances.
Yep.
Don't hide what God has given you because he wants you to multiply it.
Exactly.
Because he is a God of abundance in all things.
I want to kind of shift to another topic here real quick. And more is like Dr. Kirk Elliott, the businessman. And I want to kind of create a backdrop for this of you've been an employee in many, I mean, when I first met you, you were like doing like roofing jobs in the summer, going to college, you know? And so you've done manual labor, you've had, stock, kind of jobs, you've had, worked for other companies, you've worked for yourself. As believers in this time, I want to talk about, because I've had the privilege of meeting quite a few people that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I could probably, if I did enough interviews, find one of them that don't like you, but you run your company in a really unique way. You invest heavily into the people that are with you, into their mindsets, into how they're thinking. Like if my kids didn't work for me and they had to work somewhere, like working for Clay Clark for a year would be a great thing. He'd rough them up and they would, learn a lot of skills. They could work for you for a year. If they did that for 1 year and they wanted to, I know they'd be better, because of it. We have a little philosophy as Whiteds, and it's like this goal of leave every person and place a little better than you found it. You have the ability to do that everywhere. If you walk, we'll even do this, like the grocery store, there's all these lines. I'm like, we'll stop for a second. Like, who are we going to bless? And I'm not going to like suck up to somebody, but I know I'm going to be a nice customer checking out in this line.
Sure.
I'm going to leave them better than you found.
I'm going to thank you for helping me with this. This is, I'm going to like give more than I took, in that exchange. We all have the ability to do that. Talk about running your company. What are some of the philosophies that you have as a Christian business leader with a lot of employees? What is your role before God on how you steward that platform?
Great question.
It's really easy, yet really hard. The easy part is just be the biggest servant in the room.
That's huge.
I just want to be known as the biggest servant in the room. I lead from the bottom up, not from the top down, right? I want to uplift. I want to encourage. I want to empower everybody that works for me. So how do you do that? You lead by example. I'm always the first one there, the last one to leave, right? Everyone on my executive team. I mean, it's almost like we try to fight to be the first one there and the last one to leave, right? And it's because we love doing what we do. It's not like we have to, we get to. So when I hire people, I look for character and ethics first, because that's something that you can't train. It's something that you either have or you don't. Now, you could be the most character, have the most character, the most ethics of anybody on the planet, and you're dumber than a stump. I'm not going to hire that person.
Right.
Some things you can't coach.
Or you could be the biggest brainiac in the world and have no character and ethics. I'm still not going to hire that person. But when you have both of them, now you've got the start to something great. Then at that point, it doesn't still mean that you're going to be good. It means you have all the ingredients that you could be amazing. So then you just invest in people. You invest in them. We encourage them. My team meetings, I have a motivational speech every week.
Which has kind of become legendary and epic.
Yeah, it may even become a book.
It might become a book. I've got a publisher that wants to actually write a book about my weekly motivational messages, right? They're not big, grand, monologues. They're like 8 to 10 minutes, uplifting message. How can we be better? How can we be better servants? When we're gone, I want to be known as the best giver, the best server in the world. I mean, that's our goal.
Yep.
And so that's what we instill into each and every one of our employees. Now, if they don't know something, they all have an open door policy to come and ask. It's like, I don't think that you're going to be dumb if you ask questions. Just ask. I'm going to think you're dumb if you don't ask.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is the thing. People have to swallow their pride. The one thing that repulses me more than anything is pride.
Explain that. I would agree, but what's that look like to you?
Somebody who will never ask questions, somebody who's embarrassed, somebody who walks around the room like they own the place, right? Somebody who just has this arrogance about them, and you can feel it. It's like the energy in the room shifts when they walk in. It's like, oh, they're here. yeah, I wanted to say, ooh, awesome, they're here.
Right.
I love being around them. And then there's some people that are just a drain because they command all the attention and they look and say, oh, look at me, rather than how can I help other people?
It's obvious too. I mean, it's important to God. God talks about the importance of humility. And it's interesting, over this last week in the prophetic report this week, 3 different times humility was brought up, that we need to be humble. This is the time that we really need to be humble. So it's really interesting that you say that.
I mean, it's what's built our company the way that it is. We will bend over backwards to help people. And one thing is, we never know what somebody's story is. We never know why they're having a bad day, because you can grumble and complain. It's like, why'd they treat me so poorly? It's like, you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
They might have just, been cheated on by a spouse. They might have just lost a family member. They might have just lost their job. They're having a bad day. Operate in grace, operate in mercy, just love your neighbor, right? And that's how we operate. I mean, literally everybody at my firm operates in that, because how can I say that? Because that's what I look for when I hire them.
Right.
And if they don't have it, they don't get hired. Right. And so then the rest, the training comes in, and really we have an amazing team. And then we like to promote from within. Like, once we find somebody that's in a position, it's like, I think you're better suited for another position, right? We don't have to look for somebody else. We just move them into that position, and we just keep hiring, growing. And our firm is exploding.
It has.
I mean, it's absolutely exploding. And that's just a blessing. So humility to me, if you read through Exodus, what does one of the first chapters or verses in Exodus say? It's like, Moses is one of the most humble men of all time, basically. Who wrote Exodus? Moses. It's like, so what was he saying in that?
Yeah.
So people would say, well, that's not humble. That's pride. What he was saying is, I am nothing outside of God.
Yeah.
But with God, I can do anything.
Yeah.
See, that's extreme humility, knowing that. And it's like, I can't do anything without God, and the gifts and the talents and the abilities that he's given me, and the love that he's given me for other people, right? It's like, that's where we are.
And it's reflected, though, in the people around you. We had a saying, in business, people in our kind of past world, a lot of coaching, franchise owners, and a lot of this space, people kind of, what's this secret? What's this thing where I can move ahead? And I'm like, we just invest in people. Like our idea was always, we would build people and people would build the company, versus I'm building a company and I need some people, and that's what I love Clay Clark so much is I've been around him for a couple of years, and I've seen 2 things happen. I've seen some of these young men and women that work for him that are in their 20s that are now in a position where they're following his coaching advice. They're buying rental properties. They're making twice as much money on the side as they do working for Clay. They're building wealth because he teaches these business workshops as well. That's his main thing before COVID and the government thing happened. He would teach, business principles. So these guys
he's anointed for it.
He's anointing for business and teaching. So these employees are all they work long hours. He's up at 3 a.m. going hard, this kind of stuff. But these guys are making, building wealth outside of that. And I've seen the other thing happen. Ones that have been with him for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like eventually they just leave and they run their own big companies.
Right.
And like he launches them better off. Almost like a great NFL coach will have these like coaching trees of coaches that left them and then they win Super Bowls and go on. Like the people that stay, now again, not all stay, because some don't make it a week. Because they're like,
tough.
They're like, oh, whoa, like they really work.
Yeah.
And they maybe they're not used to that, then that kind of accountability, but they thrive. One of our best friends had a son that was considering going to college. Wasn't 100% sure why I want to go and what I want to do. We're like, hey,
knew you want to do business.
Hey, why don't you just take time out for 1 year and like just work for Clay for a year, and like just see where you're at in 12 months.
It's been so good for him. He is doing great.
Oh, it's just he's thriving, and it's kind of roughed him up, and he's working hard, and he's like, oh, I'm learning all these new skills and how to do these things. But it's gotten better, and I see that. You have some people in your company that I've met are like 23, 24, 25 that I would hire, put in charge of like anything. They're some of the most competent, high performing people in the world. But that's, to me, that's a reflection of a culture.
It is, and I'm blessed, and my team makes me a blessed person, right? I'm blown away by them.
Mhm.
But the biggest secret weapon that we have is Joe, my wife.
Yeah. Wow.
Because there's constant prayer.
Mm.
There's constant prayer.
Huge.
I mean, may not be doing day-to-day stuff at the firm, but we go home, we talk about what we're doing, and we bring Holy Spirit empowered wisdom into the company, and it's been years, decades of prayer.
Wow.
What we're seeing today didn't just happen, and it doesn't happen by accident.
Mhm.
It happened with Holy Spirit guidance, prayer, taking leaps of faith, calculated risks, never stupid risks,
Mhm.
right? Calculated risks, when Holy Spirit tells you to do something, it might not make sense logically, but it makes sense because God says to do it,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
But yeah, that's when you have, like you two, joining together in prayer for guidance, for wisdom, for courage, for boldness, for empowerment. It's amazing what can happen. And what we have today is a reflection of that. The people that we've hired is a reflection of we're praying for the best people, and God brings them to us. And it's just, I wouldn't know how to run it any other way.
I love that. You know, something I shared we had the Pastors for Trump prayer meeting in Miami. And I was talking about the power of prayer and prayer. I mean, God told me several years ago, it's impossible to pray and for something not to happen. It's interesting. Colton, obviously you know Colton, Flyover family. If you don't know Colton,
So
it's our
people meet him
producer.
at the event, like,
son.
"You're producer Colton?"
Yeah. Wow.
Like, he's become this thing.
Yeah. Well,
Producer Colton.
when he was in his late teens, early 20s, he was going on a missions trip to Costa Rica. And there was going to be a team of 30 people that were going. And obviously, it costs money. And that was a concern for most of the people that are going on the missions trip, is how am I going to get this money? But the person leading the trip said, don't worry about the money. That will come. But what you have to do is you actually have to get 10 intercessors, 10 people. Each person had to get 10 people that are going to be praying for you while you're in Costa Rica and praying for our trip. And so they all went out. They got their 10 intercessors, and the money came, of course. So they go to Costa Rica, and before they even go to minister their first time, they're at this church, and they're eating a meal together with some of the people, and they're serving. And one of the ladies comes along, and she had this growth underneath of her chin. And the leader leading the trip tapped the growth and said, not on my watch. And they all watched this growth underneath this lady's chin disappear.
Like on the spot.
On the spot.
Amazing.
And they were like...
Actually, their table eating, Colton says they were eating there like...
And Colton said,
like,
this is going to be unlike any ministry trip
Whoa.
I've ever been on.
Because, it's easy in the church world to be like, let's pray for God's will and God's blessings and God's comfort, but you don't want to paint God in the corner, to look like a loser if they don't get healed. Like, you don't pray for something to happen in that moment. Mm-hmm. Typically in most situations.
Exactly. And so
that boldness.
Yeah, that boldness. And Colton said, everybody looked and they're like, wow, okay, this is going to be an amazing trip. So they got done eating and they were getting ready to go out and minister. And she reminded them, she said, okay, there's 30 of us that are going out to minister, but she said there's 300 that are actually partnered with us that are praying right now. We're going to see amazing
Spartans!
things. Exactly. And Colton said they saw miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. And it became very obvious to us. We actually have 11 intercessors that pray for the Flyover Conservatives team. And we have seen miracle after miracle after miracle. And we can tangibly feel prayer. Prayer is powerful. And that's why I think it's so important. That's why I was talking about at the Pastors for Trump meeting, that we need to be praying for President Trump. We need to be praying for our country. When we are linking arms, we're going to see miracles. And that's exactly what you're saying. Right. When you and Joe are praying for your company, you are seeing Holy Spirit come and you're seeing miracles that are happening. And it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And that's our expectation.
Yeah.
I don't expect anything different. And that's not an arrogance. That's a humility that I can't do it on my own, but God can do anything. And that's what we expect.
I love it. That's incredible.
Last little word of encouragement. We said thriving at the beginning, thriving in the economic tsunami. We've talked a lot from everything from like reaping and sowing to principles. We talked about the 70, 10, 10, 10. We've talked about all these ideas. What do you see for potentially America thriving? We don't have a ton of control over that. We can pray for it. But then B, two-tiered question, what's the advice you have for the people listening to thrive as we wrap up?
I don't see really bright days for America in the near future. I think it gets darker before it gets lighter, but I do think that it gets lighter. Like we've talked about in earlier shows, I believe central bank digital currency is probably the mark of the beast, but yet I don't think that it's going to be the only game in town. So as we thrive, simply put, if you want to have a maximized future, maximize every day. Identify the trends that are going up and get into them as soon as you can. Identify the ones that are going down and get out of them as soon as you can. That's what we help people do, right? But Holy Spirit will guide you when you pray about it. I mean, James tells us, if you lack wisdom, ask for it. God will give it to you. He's a generous Father.
He gives abundantly.
And he gives more than what you ask for, right? Because that's his nature. So
was Jesus' brother, by the way.
Right.
You know, I mean, you got to keep that in context. I mean, he's speaking with some confidence.
Yep.
Yeah. He's seen it. He experienced it, right? And so I do think it's going to get darker. We're going to see some economic turmoil. But Jesus told us it's not necessarily comfortable going to following me. It's just going to be beneficial, right? The hard choices. Make hard choices. Don't be afraid of making the hard choices. And just watch what God starts to do. But I think we need to have community of like-minded people around us. We need to pray like our life depends on it, because it always does. We have to focus on the solution rather than the storm, because if you focus on the storm, you're going to be gripped with fear and paralyzed by it. Focus on the solution, you'll have a smile on your face. See, all of this is part of a thriving mentality. But financially, you know, this is primarily what I do. It's pretty easy right now. In the past, there was all kinds of options. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds during the Trump years, Reagan years, they all did great. Real estate did great during that time. Now, with rising interest rates, rising taxes, rising inflation, lowering wages, the only thing that makes sense, and I hate to be a one-trick pony, but it really is the only thing that makes sense, are tangible assets like gold and silver, and I would do silver. So financially, I would go into precious metals for this time, you know, for such a time as this. At some point, we'll sell, lock in our profits, go into something else. Now, during this time, we're going to see political chaos, and this is where through Holy Spirit guidance, don't believe everything that you hear, right?
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff out there that this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and the Word tells us, you know, in these times, there's going to be a lot of people that say things that aren't true. Have wisdom and discernment and guidance to sift through that. Because, man, I've got people that call me every day who think the world is ending tomorrow. The world is not ending tomorrow. No. Might get bad, might be better, but it's not ending tomorrow.
It's just changing.
It's just changing. You know, when the Roman Republic fell, did the people go away? No. Is Italy still there as a landmass? Yep. It's just not the Roman Republic. It's now Italy. Right. And other nations around it that, I mean, so it's different. Are we still going to be around? Yes. Is America collapsing? Well, yeah, I don't know how it looks in the future, but we will still be here. We're still going to have neighbors that need Jesus. We're still going to have a light to shine. And the darker the world gets, the less light that it needs to light it up. Right. Yeah. You don't have to be this amazing, bold, courageous, great orator. You don't have to be a public speaker. You just have to love your neighbor. Yeah. Right. I mean, and that's it. So anyways, I think this is how you can start to thrive, is by helping your neighbors and being that voice of hope when people need it. And for us, there is hope in your finances, and we're helping people get to that point. But God needs a willing bride that wants to serve, and that wants to bless, and that wants to give. And that's what this is all about.
I love it.
I thank you for writing this book. I don't know how you get done everything that you get done.
Neither do I. I really don't.
Crazy.
Between, you know, your kids, you got Joe, you got Ted, you know, your Cavapoo.
Yeah. He's a sweet little guy.
He's sweet, but he's kind of the boss.
He thinks he rules the roost.
Yeah. And but you took time to write Thriving in the Economic Tsunami. Flyover family, I strongly encourage you to go out, get a copy of this book, and not just one, but get one for people that you know and care about. Not because, like, I know how book business works. You're not like pretending on like, hey, you're going to be padding your pockets in the future through book sales.
Right.
That is not. It's like a business card. It's just you want these out there, but it's full of a lot of ideas that are going to help you and the people around you. When you got people that are fearful, get this book in their hands because it's not denying there is a tsunami coming. Jamie Dimon says that, or Chase Bank, and we started with that. But if you want to thrive in the economic tsunami, the tips are in here. It's full of wisdom, advanced and basic economic information from a double PhD. Thanks for taking the time to write this because you're putting the information in people's hands. Then they're empowered to run with it, which eliminates fear.
And then Flyover family, you can go to flyovergold.com. It's a landing page, great information. When you scroll down to the bottom, there's a place you can fill out your information. When you do that, someone from Dr. Kirk's team will get a hold of you to help answer questions that you have. It's absolutely free, help you make the best decisions for your family so you can sleep at night. Or you can also call 720-605-3900. Do it today. Don't wait. I promise you, you're going to be thankful for it. Kirk, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We really appreciate it. This has been a blast. Are you having a hard time sleeping at night, thinking, what am I going to do about my finances?
You know, times are really changing. They're changing fast. Let me give you a quick example of how. In 1920, if you had a $20 bill and 1 ounce of gold, you could go into any men's clothing store and buy an entire suit. You could buy the jacket, the shirt, the belt, shoes, the whole bit. Today, that $20 bill, what's it going to get you?
Not much.
Maybe the socks, maybe a handkerchief, but the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you the entire suit at any men's store in America. That's the difference. That's what inflation does to your dollar. It's a deflating dollar caused by inflation. Now today, that's happening faster than ever. You need somebody that you trust that can help get you out of a fake currency and into something that's going to keep you safe.
And we know a guy that has 2 PhDs by the name of Dr. Kirk Elliott. We have known him for over 25 years, and he's someone we completely trust.
You need somebody that you can get a hold of, somebody that's going to be there for you to get back out of it, and then maybe back into the stock market, maybe back into something else when things settle down. But right now is not that time. You need somebody that you trust and somebody you can call and make those worries go away.
That's exactly right. So you can go to flyovergold.com, fill out your information for a free consultation, or you can call 720-605-3900. Do it today.
You'll be glad you did.
For more great content, go to flyoverconservatives.com.